Chapter 1767. Tomorrow, the third chapter will be released on the public account. Please pay attention to the public account. 6 Paths of Oblivion. On the top of Azura Peak, bloody light filled the air. Bloody clouds surged and dyed half the sky. Chen Xiu's sword made the people of the dripping blood tower tremble with fear. They were so frightened that they almost collapsed. However, the arrival of the Blood Claw King was like a stabilizing needle that eliminated the fear in their hearts and calmed them down. As a powerful warrior at the peak of the 7-star battle force, he was ranked 7th on the Taishan Supreme Saint ranking. He had once killed an elite 7-star battle force warrior, so he was undoubtedly a super existence. Although there were more powerful 8-star and 9-star experts in the half-step Great Saint realm, there were very few 8-star experts in the entire Profound Universe realm. As for 9-star experts, so far there was only one known 9-star expert. Facing Blood Claw Lord, everyone, including Chen Xiu, looked solemn. The Blood Claw King was shrouded in a black robe, and even his head was covered. His face couldn't be seen clearly, and only his blood-red eyes flickered with cold light. It was as if he could tear apart the void, causing people's hearts to palpitate. An incomparably terrifying aura surged forth like a torrential flood, mercilessly attacking. Instantly, other than Chen Xiu, everyone was stunned. Silver Blade King and Heaven Battering King were fine. After all, they were strong enough and could resist the aura. But the others couldn't. They couldn't move at all. Terrifying. This Blood Claw Lord alone was like the arrival of a powerful sect, oppressing everyone with his might. Such power made Chen Xiu even more excited. Blood Claw Lord's eyes were blazing. He glanced over and stared at Chen Xiu's face with a terrifying pressure. It was as if he wanted to see through Chen Xiu. "You're Chen Xiu?" Blood Claw Lord's voice was hoarse and obscure. It seemed to be asking, but also seemed to be very certain. "Surrender and come with me. Shura sect will be safe. Surrender and ask the sword in my hand." Chen Xiu's long sword flew across the sky. His voice was cold. There was a trace of strange cold light in his eyes. Shocking killing intent circled around him. "Since that's the case, I'll cripple you first." The Blood Claw Lord's voice was filled with viciousness. The moment he finished speaking, he suddenly waved his sleeve. Immediately, a black storm swept out. It rapidly compressed in the blink of an eye, condensing into a black streak of light. There was a smear of scarlet on the edge of the blade, giving off a nauseating stench. In just an instant, the black blade light tore through the void and arrived. However, Chen Xiu had no intention of dodging. He swung his sword horizontally, and the gray sword light was like thunder breaking through the air, condensing an unparalleled murderous intent. The saber light and the sword light collided in an instant. The sword light dissipated in an instant, and as the sword vibrated, the saber light also shattered. The Blood Claw Monarch was shocked. Even though it was just a casual attack, it was impossible to block it without the power of a 7-star warrior. In other words, Chen Xiu's combat power was at least at the 7-star level. Thinking of this, the Blood Claw King felt a chill run down his spine. When he received the news, it was Chen Xiu's combat strength from a few years ago. He should be an elite 5-star. However, in just a few years, he was able to possess the combat strength of an ordinary 7-star warrior. It was simply unimaginable. Big secret. This person definitely had a big secret. It was no wonder that the Rakshasa monarch wanted him to act at all costs, and even asked the right emissary to cooperate to capture this person alive. "This is really beyond my expectations," the Blood Claw monarch sneered. In an instant, without any movement, the black robe suddenly shook in the wind, as if it was fluttering in the air. Chen Xiu's sharp eyes had already caught a glimpse of a shadow. It seemed to have escaped into the void at an astonishing speed and disappeared in an instant. Only Chen Xiu could see this scene. What the others saw was the black robe suddenly fluttering, and the figure under the black robe directly disappeared without a trace. It was as if there was no one under the black robe, and now it was just rippling in the wind. A strong sense of danger suddenly swept over, as if an invisible tide was about to drown him. However, Chen Xiu stood quietly in the void without moving, and the Nirvana evil sword fell naturally. Chen Xiu's senses were raised to the extreme. Other than the differences between cultivation techniques and sword techniques, as well as Tao will, some of the abilities that the original body had mastered were also mastered by the clone. The Blood Claw Monarch's speed was extremely fast, like lightning. Moreover, not only was it fast, but it also seemed to have merged into the void, making it even more difficult to detect. A terrifying murderous intent was hidden in the void, and when it exploded, it would release an extremely terrifying power. This attack was fatal. Of course, the Blood Claw Monarch would not kill Chen Zong, but he wanted to directly cripple Chen Zong, or even cripple him, and then capture him alive and hand him to the Rakshasa Monarch. Time passed slowly. Chen Xiu closed his eyes, and his divine consciousness spread out, raising his senses to the extreme. Heart Domain. Chen Xiu also released his heart domain. The heart domain enveloped the surroundings, and the slightest change was all sensed by him. Immediately, Chen Xiu sensed a blurry figure that seemed to be wandering between the void cracks, circling around him, and slowly approaching him. The Blood Claw Monarch. Chen Xiu did not move, but quietly sensed and waited for the Blood Claw Monarch to come closer, waiting for the best time to attack. If this sword was used, it would definitely kill the Blood Claw Monarch. 1 breath, 2 breaths, 3 breaths. Suddenly, the Blood Claw Monarch's speed increased, and he charged towards Chen Xiu like a thunderbolt splitting the void. His figure also turned from invisible to tangible. He was wearing a dark red tight-fitting martial robe, and his slender body was like a dark red poisonous snake. In an instant, he twisted and bounced in the void, and his speed increased rapidly, snaking closer. He suddenly grabbed out with both hands, and it seemed to have turned into a bloody claw that directly tore the void apart. With extreme murderous intent, he mercilessly charged towards Chen Xiu. This was the moment. The body of the sword trembled slightly, and an almost undetectable sword hum spread out, fusing into the void. The gray light swept out like a dragon and lightning, turning into layers of ripples that penetrated from the hilt to the tip of the sword. The most powerful killing move, a sword pierced through the void. The gray sword light disappeared in an instant, turning into a thunderbolt that was pure and condensed from baleful intent and baleful qi. It attacked at an extremely shocking speed, leaving a shadow in the void. Heavenly Fiend Sword Art, Evil Shadow. The Heavenly Fiend Sword Art was a new sword art that Chen Xiu created after training in the Azura Secret Realm, combining the accumulation of the burning evil Azura sword art and his own sword art. The first move was Evil Shadow. Chen Xiu did not hold back in this sword. Elite 7-star combat strength. The sword pierced through the void, and the Blood Claw Monarch's hair stood on end. Although he was sure that Chen Xiu had at least 7-star combat strength, he could not help but be shocked when he felt the power of his opponent's sword. Although he had killed an elite 7-star before, it was not that easy. In the blink of an eye, Evil Shadow had already pierced through the void with extremely terrifying murderous intent, mercilessly piercing through the body of the Blood Claw Monarch. However, Chen Xiu's expression changed slightly. This sword did not feel like it had pierced through a physical body. Die! Behind Chen Xiu, a bloody cold light suddenly appeared. The claw seemed to have pierced through the heaven and earth, and the murderous intent burst out without holding back. The real body of the Blood Claw Monarch appeared behind Chen Xiu and attacked. This attack was enough to tear Chen Zong's back apart. Of course, Rakshasa Monarch's order was to capture Chen Xiu alive. Hence, the Blood Claw Monarch still held back some of his strength and only severely injured Chen Xiu. Swish! In an instant, Chen Xiu's body was hit by the bloody claw. It pierced through his back and tore downwards. This was not the real body. Under the heart domain, Chernzong seemed to be in control of everything. His real body had already moved forward in an instant. Like a cicada shedding its shell, he rushed forward, twisted his waist in midair, and turned around to slash with his sword. It was as if a thunderbolt could destroy a mountain. Clang! A sharp sound reverberated, and the ripples were rolling. Chernzong felt as if his long sword had struck an extremely hard object. The force of the recoil caused his sword to break apart. It was the Blood Claw Monarch's claw. The moment Chen Xiu's sword body was slightly swayed, the Blood Claw Monarch's claw slid and hooked onto the sword body. His strength suddenly exploded, pulling the sword body and pulling Chen Xiu closer. The other claw suddenly broke through the air and attacked fiercely, wanting to tear Chen Xiu's shoulder apart. Chen Xiu's left hand's fingers were like a sword, condensing the tyrannical power of the burning evil Azura skill. He instantly pierced through the air like a giant sword that could destroy mountains. The sword fingers collided with the claw. Chen Xiu felt his fingers tremble, as if they were about to break, but he still blocked the attack of the claw. The Nirvana evil sword turned, and with a wonderful technique, it was immediately pulled out from under the opponent's claw and slashed towards the Blood Claw Monarch's throat. With the sharpness of the Nirvana evil sword, if the Blood Claw Monarch's neck was cut in half. After all, the Blood Claw Monarch was an expert who had experienced countless life and death battles. He was powerful and experienced, and his reaction was astonishing. His head tilted back slightly, and he narrowly avoided Chen Xiu's sword slash. The claw also slashed out in an instant. Claw shadows filled the sky, blotting out the sky and covering the earth, like a storm. However, Chen Xiu did not retreat at all. With the sword in his hand, he blocked all of the Blood Claw Monarch's attacks. The two people's attacks were extremely fast, and the battle was extremely fierce. Everyone watching was indescribably shocked. Whether it was the people from the Dripping Blood Tower or the experts from the Shura sect, they were all dumbfounded. Chen Xiu's strength was so powerful. The Silver Blade Monarch and the Heaven Battering King were indescribably shocked. They could not imagine it at all. Of course, they also knew that Chen Xiu was not called Chen Xiu, but Chernzong. Chernzong had also informed them about this. The people from the Dripping Blood Tower were extremely horrified. Although they were all outlaws, they could not help but feel a chill run down their spines. They actually went to the front door of such a fierce person, and even threatened to slaughter the other party's sect. They were simply courting death. This was at least the combat strength of a 7-star elite, and he was able to fight the Blood Claw Monarch to such an extent. Left Emissary, it seems that with your ability, you won't be able to take down this junior. A voice that sounded like a large bell, and was filled with ridicule, was suddenly transmitted over from afar. Soon after, a figure swiftly approached. It gradually became clear from an undetectable figure. Chapter 1768. His aura was overbearing and forceful. The moment he appeared, he seemed to be suppressing the sky and earth. The air around him froze instantly, as if it was made of fine steel. This kind of aura was boundlessly tyrannical. It was like an ancient and tyrannical mountain was suppressing the world, causing everyone's expression to change greatly. It also caused Chen Xiu's expression to become serious. Right, Emissary, what are you waiting for? Take him down. Blood Claw Lord did not care about the other party's mockery and immediately said. Chen Xiu's combat strength was indeed very high. It would be very difficult to capture him alive without killing him. It was also because of this that he had informed the right emissary to help. Although the right emissary mocked him, he knew the severity of the matter. After all, Chen Xiu was someone that Rakshasa Lord wanted to capture alive. He was very important and could not afford to lose him. In an instant, the right emissary made his move. His broad shoulders shook slightly, and the sound of mountains collapsing and the earth cracking could be heard. The void shook and the air exploded. The right emissary's thick and long left arm was like a giant python coming out of its cave. It rushed out at an astonishing speed with a violent aura. His 5 fingers were spread open like a giant python opening its bloody mouth to devour its prey. Chen Xiu felt that the world in front of him was suddenly shrouded in darkness. A giant palm, like the mouth of a mountain python, suddenly rushed towards him and bit him. This move was extremely exquisite. It was a combination of strength and technique. It gave Chen Xiu a feeling that he could not avoid it no matter what. It was as if he could only wait obediently in the face of this move and be captured by the other party. He is Lord Manshan. Chen Xiu's heart skipped a beat when he heard the exclamation. Lord Manshan. He was also one of the super experts on the Taishan Supreme Sage Board. Blood Claw Lord was ranked 7th, and Lord Manshan was ranked 6th. It could be said that the top 10 experts on the Taishan Supreme Sage Board were all tyrannical existences that could suppress elite 7-star experts. They might not necessarily be 8-star experts, but they were definitely top 7-star experts. Chen Xiu also noticed another point, which was the way Blood Claw Lord and Lord Manshan addressed each other. Left emissary. Right emissary. Together, they were the left and right emissaries. It sounded simple, but the meaning behind it was not. Left and right emissaries. This form of address often meant that the two of them were in cahoot. Furthermore, they were subordinates of a certain power or a certain person. Both of them had the battle prowess of a top 7-star. Who could control them? Without a doubt, it was most likely an expert with even higher battle prowess. 8-star? 9 stars. Without a doubt, it was the mastermind behind the left and right messengers who wanted to deal with him and the Shura sect. While Chen Xiu's mind was racing, the barbarian Mountain King's hand had already reached Chen Xiu. It covered the sky and completely sealed off Chen Xiu's surroundings. It was as if even his body was imprisoned. He swung his sword. The Nirvana evil sword was incomparably sharp and instantly tore apart the sealed void. Chen Xiu's figure also turned into a wisp of gray lightning and instantly shuttled back and forth, avoiding the attack of King Manshan. The blood-colored claw reached out soundlessly, as if it was going to pierce through half of Chen Xiu's body. It was the Blood Claw King who had grasped the opportunity with great precision. Barbarian Mountain King's attack missed its target, so he immediately attacked again. His right arm shook violently, as if it was capable of shattering mountains and splitting the earth. His attack was coordinated with Blood Claw King's attack. The combination of two top 7-star combatants was no doubt terrifying. In just an instant, Chen Xiu was in danger. In terms of combat strength, the current Chen Xiu was only at the elite 7-star level. He had not stepped into the 8-star level yet. If it was a one-on-one battle, it would not be impossible for him to win in the end. However, it was a 1-on-2 battle. Freedom State. Without hesitation, Chen Xiu also used the Freedom State. Since his original body had mastered this state, his doppelganger would naturally be able to do the same in a short period of time. In his eyes, a few wisps of silvery white color spread out. Chen Xiu instantly entered a mysterious state. His control over his body reached an astonishing level. His perception of his surroundings was also enhanced to the extreme. In this state, the impossible became possible. It was like a wisp of gray smoke that gradually spread out with a gust of wind. It dissipated in the air and turned into nothingness. Whether it was the Blood Claw King's attack or the Barbarian Mountain King's attack, they both missed. This scene instantly shocked the two of them. Both the Blood Claw King and the Barbarian Mountain King's eyes were filled with intense disbelief and shock. He actually escaped from the joint attack of the two of them. Other than the 8-star level, who among the 7-star level could do this? Without much time to think, 2 rays of sword light tore through the sky like lightning and instantly arrived at the two of them. He actually attacked the two of them with one sword. It was a 1-on-2 battle. The Barbarian Mountain King and the Blood Claw King were secretly furious. After all, they were experts in the top 10 of the Great Saint Leaderboard. Their combat strength was strong, and they were famous for their ferocity. Now, the two of them actually had to join forces to deal with a junior. If word got out, they would lose face. However, in order to complete the mission given by their master, they had to do this. Full force explosion. Boom. The void shook and blood light filled the sky. It was as if there was a sea of blood surging endlessly. Every wave was in the shape of a claw. It was extremely terrifying. It was as if an ancient mountain was condensed. The mountain shadows overlapped and spread out in all directions, suppressing the world. In an instant, Chern Xiu felt that the pressure on his body was even greater and heavier. However, it did not affect him at all. This was because, under the freedom state, he had completely eliminated all negative effects and disadvantages. He maintained his peak state. In this state, although Chern Xiu's combat strength did not directly increase, he was more resilient. Even an 8-star expert would find it difficult to defeat him. The battle between the 3 7-star experts became more and more intense. Terrifying shockwaves spread out. It was as if the sky was about to collapse and the void was about to shatter. The shockwaves hit the Great Encirclement Formation. In an instant, the Great Encirclement Formation shook violently. It was as if it would collapse at any time. The collision between elite 7-star experts was too shocking. Even a 6-star expert would find it difficult to withstand such power. Chern Xiu realized this. His body flashed and turned into a ray of light, escaping into the distance in an instant. The Barbarian Mountain King and the Blood Claw King immediately chased after him. Fight, fight, fight. Under the freedom state, Chern Xiu's control and application of every bit of his strength had reached a terrifying level. He could completely resist the joint attack of the Barbarian Mountain King and the Blood Claw King. He was not at a disadvantage at all. Whether it was the experts from the Dripping Blood Tower or the Shura sect, they were all stunned. How could this be? How could he be so strong? Again and again, he refreshed their understanding and exceeded their limit. It was unbelievable. It was as if they were dreaming. The Silver Blade King and the Heaven Battering King looked at each other. They clearly remembered that Chern Zong was only a Saint Realm expert a few years ago. Now, in just a few years, his combat strength had soared to such an amazing level. He had completely surpassed them. Thinking of this, the two of them could not help but smile bitterly. They really could not describe the state of their hearts at this time. It was a kind of honor and a kind of helplessness. Thinking about it, if those people of the same generation as Chern Zong knew about it, they would probably be shrouded in a shadow. This was a peerless genius who would dominate an era or even several eras. The level of the battle in front of them was completely beyond them. They could only watch and hope that Chern Zong could win. They thought that Chern Xiu was Chern Zong. After all, they did not know that it was actually Chern Zong's clone. There was no need for Chern Xiu to make a move. Chern Xiu alone with his sword was enough to deal with them. Unknowingly, Chern Xiu also treated the two of them as opponents to hone his skills. After all, the two of them were top 7-star experts. Moreover, they were working together. Fight. No rest. No more. The more the battle went on, the more frightened the Barbarian Mountain King and the Blood Claw King were. How could this be? Even with the two of them working together, they could not suppress and capture the other party. What was the secret of the person that their master wanted to capture alive? The two of them could not help but feel a headache. In the situation where they could not kill the other party, even if they used all their strength, it was inevitable that they would be restrained. However, the other party's sword was merciless. If there was even the slightest chance, the other party would kill them directly. After another fierce battle, the aftermath surged and shattered the world, leaving countless cracks. The Barbarian Mountain King and the Blood Claw King suddenly burst out with a powerful attack. The Barbarian Mountain King's punch was like a black tyrannical mountain. It was as swift as a meteor and carried with it a terrifying destructive force that could destroy everything. The phantom of a scarlet giant scorpion suddenly appeared on the Blood Claw King's body. The tail was very long and emitted a fishy smell that was suffocating. In an instant, the giant scorpion's tail trembled and turned into a scarlet phantom. With extreme killing intent, it mercilessly pierced through the air and pierced towards Chen Zong. Killer move. The two of them very tacitly used their killer move. An extremely strong sense of danger arose spontaneously, as if it was going to drown Chen Xiu. His expression did not change, and his eyes were cold and calm. Murderous shadow. In an instant, Chen Zong consecutively attacked with his sword. The speed of the sword was extremely fast, like lightning flashing through the air. Then, the long sword was erected, like an incense stick facing the sky. Chen Xiu's expression became even colder. His long hair fluttered without wind as if it was soaring into the sky, and his long robe rustled. An extremely terrifying murderous intent instantly surged into the Nirvana evil sword. The heavenly ferocious Tao will. The second level of the Supreme Realm. That's right, Chen Xiu had already comprehended the heavenly ferocious Tao will to the second level of the Supreme Realm. The benefits that the Azura mystic realm brought to Chen Xiu were extremely shocking. At this moment, Chen Xiu was going all out. The sword slashed through in an instant as if it was played down. It was like smoke rising in spirals, like smoke rising slowly from a kitchen chimney, and also like the roar of thunder. It was earth-shattering and earth-shattering. This was an extremely terrifying sword move. The first form of the heavenly ferocious sword technique was called the Evil Shadow. It condensed the murderous aura and murderous intent, and focused on speed. It was extremely fast, and the sword would arrive as soon as it was drawn. And now, it was the second form, which Chen Xiu had created himself not long ago. It was not perfect yet, but it could be used. This form was different from the Evil Shadow. In terms of speed, it was inferior to the Evil Shadow, but in terms of direct killing power, it was far superior. The second form of the heavenly ferocious sword technique, Sword Massacre, an extremely terrifying murderous intent condensed in the sword body. With Chen Xiu's strength, it instantly attacked. An extremely stunning killing arc like a crescent moon tore through the void and charged towards the Blood Claw King. This sword was filled with murderous intent. Chapter 1769. The third chapter of The Lone God has been updated. Please follow the official account. 6 Paths of Oblivion. The crescent moon was like a heavenly saber splitting the sky, pressing forward with indomitable will. Nothing in the world could block its sharpness, nor could it block its cutting. Kill. Blood Claw Lord was terrified. He felt that his mind, will, and soul were all being torn apart and destroyed by the terrifying sword light. Burst. Completely burst. The giant scorpion shadow suddenly shone brightly and became more solid. The blood hook pierced fiercely again, bursting with a terrifying power that seemed to be able to pierce through everything. It was a full-force attack. The sword massacre move collided with Blood Claw Lord's full-force attack. They paused for a moment and resisted each other. An ear-piercing sound was heard, as if a sword and a saber were cutting each other. The terrifying force continued to wreak havoc. Barbarian Mountain King attacked again. Boom! Boom! Both of his fists were condensed with a terrifying power that was as strong as a mountain. He punched out continuously, and each punch could shatter a mountain. As he punched out continuously, it was as if the void was completely smashed and shattered, turning into a vacuum ruin. Chen Xiu's expression didn't change, but his body twisted in an instant, doing all kinds of unbelievable and illogical actions. The Nirvana evil sword cut through the void, and the sword light was straight and sharp, as if it could cut the void like cutting a cake. The seemingly disorderly sword slashes were like a child's scribbling. However, they were able to separate each of Barbarian Mountain King's punches, causing them to be unable to combine their powers. Barbarian Mountain King was horrified by such a precise grasp of martial arts. Both Barbarian Mountain King and Blood Claw Lord had secretly agreed that they would capture this person no matter what to complete the mission given by their lord. Although this person was very strong and could fight against the two of them, it was only temporary. At the end of the battle, his strength would be consumed and his strength would be weakened. At that time, it would be the time for him to be killed. What they did not know was that Chen Xiu's strength would not be weakened even if his strength was consumed in the self-freedom state. On the other hand, Barbarian Mountain King and Blood Claw Lord's strength would be affected as their strength was consumed. Gradually, Barbarian Mountain King and Blood Claw Lord felt that they were being suppressed and gradually fell into a disadvantageous position. This discovery made the two of them feel their blood run cold. They couldn't understand it at all. To them, the realm of self and freedom was too far away. They had never heard of it before, so they had no idea what it was. Left emissary, if we continue fighting like this, I'm afraid we won't be able to defeat him. King Mansion's voice rang in King Bloodclaw's ears. Of course, he didn't say the rest. They would not be able to do anything to the other party. In fact, they might even be suppressed by the other party. Blood Claw King also understood this. The only thing we can do now is to retreat temporarily and report this matter to the master, Blood Claw King replied. The other party's strength was completely unexpected. It was not that they were too weak, but that the other party was too strong. He was no longer someone that they and the right emissary could deal with. Only the Lord himself could suppress him. The two of them changed their minds and finished their discussion, preparing to leave. Both of them struck out fiercely. Their energy surged, and the aftershock was like a surging tide. It surged, and the impact was endless, drowning Chen Xiu. At the same time, King Manshan and King Bloodclaw fled in different directions at their fastest speed. They used their movement techniques to escape. He escaped. One of the Dripping Blood Tower's experts was stunned. His jaw almost dropped. Dumbfounded. Everyone was dumbfounded. King Bloodclaw and King Manshan, who were ranked 7th and 6th on the Great Saint ranking, were terrifying experts who could stop children from crying at night. They had joined forces to deal with a junior, but they had escaped. Was this a dream? Their escape was also out of Chen Xiu's expectations. But Chen Xiu, who was in the realm of self and freedom, reacted extremely quickly. Without hesitation, Chen Zong chased after King Bloodclaw. As for King Manshan, he ignored him for the time being. Where is Luo Sha King? Chen Xiu's speed was astonishing. Like a sword light that could split heaven and earth, he flew past in an instant and chased after King Bloodclaw. At the same time, his cold voice rang in King Bloodclaw's ears. King Bloodclaw couldn't help but tremble. Luo Sha King. He actually knew the Lord. King Bloodclaw had no idea what had happened thousands of years ago, so he didn't understand why the Lord would name this person and want to capture him. It seemed that there was some enmity between the two sides. Tell me, and I'll spare your life. Chen Xiu's voice rang out again, but King Bloodclaw sneered. Spare my life. Although Chen Xiu was powerful, he wasn't weak either. Although he couldn't capture Chen Xiu, it was impossible for Chen Xiu to kill him. Since you don't want to talk, I'll send you on your way. Chen Xiu's voice rang in King Bloodclaw's ears again. Suddenly, an extremely strong sense of danger exploded in King Bloodclaw's mind. Chen Xiu's body trembled slightly as he stood in the void. His eyes suddenly flashed with traces of flowing light. The flowing light was gray and chaotic. It was filled with a trace of nirvana life chi fluctuation, and it was filled with death chi and death will. Evil eye of nirvana. Through continuous cultivation and the continuous improvement of his base strength, Chen Xiu's mastery of the evil eye of nirvana had reached the level of great success. The evil eye of nirvana was a minor superpower that was cultivated by Supreme Saint Realm expert. It was difficult to cultivate this superpower before reaching the Supreme Saint Realm. However, Chen Xiu's body was very compatible with the minor superpower, so it was easier for him to cultivate it. When the evil eye of Nirvana reached the level of great success, not only did its power increase, but it also became more flexible. In an instant, an evil wheel of Nirvana condensed in each of his eyes. Death light filled the air, and the death will became more intense. Nirvana death light. 2 gray lights filled with a thick death chi shot out from Chen Xiu's evil wheels like 2 sword lights. Fast. It was incomparably fast, like an aurora piercing through the sky. Although it was launched later, it arrived first. In just an instant, it had closed in on King Bloodclaw. King Bloodclaw's hair stood on end, and a chill spread throughout his body as he trembled. It was too late to dodge. King Bloodclaw also found that he couldn't avoid it. He was completely locked on by the 2 lights. Since he couldn't avoid it, he would smash it. The giant scorpion shadow appeared again, and its long and thick tail suddenly shook. The scarlet light was extremely intense. King Bloodclaw also gave his all. He used his strongest attack just to block the 2 terrifying gray lights. In an instant, one of the Nirvana death light was shattered, but the giant scorpion shadow also started to crack, starting from the end of its tail. The other Nirvana death light hit King Bloodclaw like a hot knife through butter. King Bloodclaw's body stopped instantly, and he couldn't move anymore. With the Nirvana death light as the center, the gray color spread out layer by layer like ripples. Soon, the entire chest was dyed gray, and it didn't stop, spreading to his neck and limbs. King Bloodclaw kept trembling, and his eyes bulged as if he was struggling. He used all his strength to resist, but he was defeated. Death spread in his body, and his vitality was quickly being extinguished. Chen Xiu quickly closed in like lightning, and his sword slashed through the air. Evil shadow. The gray sword light was like a thunderbolt breaking through the air, piercing through the void, and piercing through the forehead of King Bloodclaw, who couldn't move at all. The terrifying sword intent and sword chi invaded his mind, shattering his soul. At this point, the infamous house master of the Dripping Blood Tower, the powerful and ruthless 7th on the Great Saint ranking, King Bloodclaw, was dead. And the one who killed him was the supreme elder of the Shura sect, Chen Xiu. After killing King Bloodclaw, Chen Xiu also exited the state of freedom, and immediately felt weak. Activating the state of freedom would constantly increase the consumption of one's essence, chi, and spirit. The second, and most important, was the use of the Nirvana death light. The power of a minor's superpower was extraordinary, but the consumption was also shocking. The 2 Nirvana death lights had directly consumed most of Chen Xiu's essence, chi, and spirit. Currently, Chen Xiu could only use such an attack, and it was difficult for him to use it a second time. Fortunately, he finally killed King Bloodclaw. If King Bloodclaw and King Manshan didn't escape in different directions, Chen Xiu wouldn't have used the Nirvana death light. Otherwise, he would only be able to kill one, and it would be difficult for him to maintain the state of freedom. His strength would be greatly reduced, and he wouldn't be a match for the other. Originally, King Bloodclaw and King Manshan planned to leave separately, making it harder for the other party to chase after them. They didn't expect to be outsmarted, resulting in King Bloodclaw's death. After standing still for a while to recover some of his essence, chi, and spirit, Chen Xiu took King Bloodclaw's storage ring and quickly returned to the Shura sect. The people of the Dripping Blood Tower had already escaped. Seeing Chen Xiu return, Silver Blade King, Heaven Battering King, and the others were relieved. Chen, brother, are you okay? Silver Blade King immediately asked. I'm fine, King Bloodclaw has been killed. Chen Xiu spoke in a neither fast nor slow manner, and his words were instantly like a thunderclap that shook the minds of everyone to the point of being dazed and confused. The infamous King Bloodclaw was dead? Was this an auditory hallucination? Or was this a dream? Let's return to the sect. Chen Xiu glanced at them and took the lead to fly in the direction of the Shura sect. Everyone was still in shock. Then, they followed Chen Zong back to the Shura sect. Once back at the Shura sect, Chen Xiu immediately entered the Shura secret realm to recover his strength. Inside, the recovery speed would be more than 10 times faster than outside. Everyone in the Shura sect also knew about the news. The powerful enemy of the Dripping Blood Tower was defeated, and the leader of the Dripping Blood Tower, King Bloodclaw, was also killed by the Supreme Elder Chen Xiu. The disciples were of a lower level, so the news didn't affect them as much. However, the elders and the sect leader were completely stunned. Their minds were frozen, and they couldn't react at all. Before this, they were still worried that even a group of half-step Great Saint experts with at least 4-star battle strength would break the oath and escape. Now, the crisis was resolved, and the powerful enemy was directly killed. Good. The sect leader woke up, and he was still very excited. He couldn't help but roar, venting the indescribable excitement in his heart. Several elders also reacted, and their bodies trembled. They were too excited. Not only did the crisis of the Shura sect resolve, it also meant that from now on, the Shura sect would have an expert who was at least in the top 10 of the Great Saint ranking. Chapter 1770. In the sky above Tai Luo City of the ultimate profound world, a figure with an incomparably powerful aura emanated from his body. His aura was as shocking as a mountain as he flew across the void, as if he could topple the mountains and overturn the seas. Then, a roar resounded in all directions, as mighty as a giant wave. It was Lord Barbarian Mountain. Lord Barbarian Mountain's strength was shocking. The cultivation technique that he cultivated focused on his aura and strength. Therefore, his speed was not good enough. Of course, the so-called not good enough was relative. Lord Barbarian Mountain's combat strength was as high as a 7-star elite. He was very powerful and his speed was not slow. Even a 6-star elite could not compare with him. Lord Barbarian Mountain's flying speed was much faster than an ordinary 7-star elite. Of course, there was still a gap between him and most of the 7-star elite. How can this person be so powerful? Lord Barbarian Mountain was still in shock. When he received the message from the left emissary, Lord Bloodclaw, asking for help, he did not think much of it. However, he had to go because of his master's order. He did not expect that everything would be out of his control. With the left and right emissaries' combined strength, they could not take down Lord Barbarian Mountain. Even in a 2-on-1 battle, they could not suppress Lord Barbarian Mountain. As the battle dragged on, they felt that they were suppressed by Lord Barbarian Mountain. Lord Barbarian Mountain sensed that something was wrong. However, he could not go against his master's order and kill Lord Barbarian Mountain. Thus, he could only retreat temporarily and report this matter to his master. Perhaps, his master would have to take action personally. Lord Barbarian Mountain did not know that Lord Bloodclaw had been killed by Chen Xiu. If he had not exhausted his essence, chi and spirit, he would have been pursued by Lord Barbarian Mountain. Lord Barbarian Mountain's speed was not slow. He flew at full speed towards the outside of Tai Luo City to report this matter to his master. He did not choose to go to the Void Temple in Tai Luo City because he was worried that he would be intercepted. He wanted to leave Tai Luo City first and go to the neighboring area. He wanted to use the Void Gate in the Void Temple to get to his master faster. As he was flying, Lord Barbarian Mountain suddenly saw a white-robed figure standing in the air in front of him. The white-robed figure was motionless with his back facing Lord Barbarian Mountain. "Get lost!" Lord Barbarian Mountain shouted angrily. A terrifying aura suddenly rushed out. However, the white-robed figure did not move in the slightest. He was not affected in the slightest. Soon after, King Manshan saw the faint smile on the other party's face when he turned around. His face was filled with shock, and he looked like a cat whose tail had been stepped on. His hair stood on end, and he was extremely shocked. His incomparably strong body suddenly came to a complete stop, following which, without any hesitation, he immediately charged in another direction. Horrifying! At this moment, the barbarian mountain king's heart was filled with horror, causing his hair to stand on end. Why would this person appear here? From the looks of it, he had been waiting for a long time. However, he did not feel any pursuit along the way. When he escaped, he saw the other party chasing after the Blood Claw King with his own eyes. If he had that kind of speed, he would have surpassed the 7-star level. He would definitely be at the 8-star level. Barbarian Luo. The previous one was wearing a gray robe, but this one was wearing a white robe. Lord Barbarian Mountain's mind was in a mess. He did not think much about it. He just wanted to escape. However, he could not escape. That was because the white-robed figure was chasing after him. The distance between them was shortening rapidly. You can't escape. A calm yet cold voice sounded in his ears, sending chills down King Mansion's spine. Who are you? Lord Barbarian Mountain shouted. It was not that he was not brave enough. What he had encountered today was totally unexpected. It overturned his beliefs again and again. Didn't Lord Luosha ask you to deal with me? Chen Zong said with a smile. Yes. This person was Chen Zong. He was not Chen Xiu's doppelganger. Chen Zong knew that Chen Xiu was fighting with Lord Barbarian Mountain and Lord Bloodclaw. He did not appear immediately. Instead, he watched. After all, if he appeared, he would expose the secret of Chen Zong and his doppelganger. Fortunately, Chen Xiu's strength was strong enough. He was not at a disadvantage, even when fighting against two opponents. Originally, Chen Zong thought that after returning from the Eternal Battle Fort and comprehending the mysteries of heaven and earth, he had improved greatly in all aspects. His combat strength had soared, and he should have surpassed Chen Xiu. He did not expect Chen Xiu's doppelganger to be so strong. However, when he thought about it, it was not impossible. It was reasonable. After all, Chen Xiu's doppelganger was formed by the divine form Azura. It did not belong to the body of flesh and blood. It was like a body formed by Chen Zong's consciousness in the Eternal Battle Fort. Of course, in terms of physique level, Azura's doppelganger's physique definitely surpassed the mortal physique and reached the level of spiritual physique. Chen Zong could not tell whether it was a middle-grade spiritual physique or a higher-grade spiritual physique. However, he estimated that it must be above the low-grade spiritual physique. Chen Zong knew how amazing it was to obtain a low-grade spiritual physique in the Eternal Battle Fort. Chen Xiu had such a physique from the beginning. That was why he could improve in such a short period of time. Such a physique had great benefits. However, it also had some limitations. Cultivation. For example, Chen Zong's low-grade spiritual physique in the Eternal Battle Fort had to be in a place with dense qi of heaven and earth to cultivate quickly. It was the same for Chen Xiu. His improvement would be slow in a place without evil spirit. He would only be at the level of an ordinary genius. However, if he was in a place with dense evil spirits, he could reach the level of a peerless genius. The Azura Secret Realm was a place with dense evil spirit. Chen Xiu was like a fish in water when he cultivated there. It was reasonable that he could improve by leaps and bounds. 1 year in the Eternal Battle Fort was equivalent to 10 years in the Tianyuan Sacred Region. Chen Zong's consciousness had stayed in the Eternal Battle Fort for less than a year. Several years had passed in the Tianyuan Sacred Region. It was normal for Chen Xiu's strength to improve. Since that was the case, there was no need for Chen Zong's real body to show up. However, King Manshan could not be let go of. Since Chen Xiu could not chase after him, Chen Zong would leave it to Chen Zong. After various breakthroughs, Chen Zong's divine will had become stronger. He could now teleport himself from Bewildering Light Island to any place in Tai Luo City. Thus, he waited for King Manshan to appear. Where is Luosha King now? Chen Zong asked again. His voice was like the wind, pouring into King Manshan's ears. King Manshan did not reply. Instead, He gathered all his strength and flew at full speed. However, Chunzong had already caught up. The sunken knight's sword was unsheathed and streaked across the sky. The speed of the sword was astonishing. It was like a black star shooting towards King Manchon. The sharp aura made King Manchon's heart tremble. Dodge! Chunzong turned around and struck out with his palm. The punch was ordinary and not fast. It was like pushing open a door. However, it was filled with an astonishing aura. Rumble! Heaven and earth shook. A storm raged and roared. That palm brought about an incomparably terrifying might, as if it was capable of destroying mountains. Everything was compressed and condensed to become incomparably hard. It was as if an invisible wall with sword shadows was rampaging about, and it was also as if an ancient and majestic mountain was moving. Mountain pushing palm. The tyrannical strength of an elite 7-star battle strength was vividly demonstrated by this palm. Even though he was shocked and fearful, Barbarian Mountain King did not hold back in the slightest when he truly attacked. He attacked without any fear. This kind of combat strength was obviously much more tyrannical than that of the Blood Killer King, which made Chunzong excited. The Blood-Killing King was indeed very strong. However, compared to Chunzong, it was not enough. He could kill him with one strike. Then, what about King Manchon, an elite 7-star battle strength? How many strikes could he block? Even Chun Xiu's doppelganger could not kill such an expert with his sword techniques. He could only use the evil eye of obliteration's obliteration ray. In that case, could he kill it? He was not sure, but he was eager to try. In the face of King Manchon's palm, Chunzong did not have the slightest intention of dodging. His body rushed forward like lightning and immediately slashed out with his sword. The sunken knight's sword was extremely sharp. It tore through everything between heaven and earth. Nothing could stop it. A hole was torn in the palm that was as powerful and overbearing as a mountain. The hole could not be seen, but it could be felt. The sword spirit cultivated by the perfected Taichu sword origin technique was extremely sharp. Its earth-shattering characteristics were further enhanced. After tearing through the palm, Chunzong was like a hot knife through butter. His body was like a sword light that was indomitable. He did not look back. Approaching, swinging the sword light was dark and sharp. King Manchon's expression changed drastically. He did not dare to meet it head-on. He felt that there was a terrifying sharpness condensed in the sword light. It was as if it could tear through everything in the world. His physique was quite strong. The defensive power of the cultivation technique he cultivated was also very strong. However, he was not confident that he could withstand it. Approaching, the infinite martial extreme chain sword was immediately used for close-range combat. King Manchon was also good at close-range combat. As his fists and palms changed, each strike carried a powerful and terrifying power. It was as if he was using a long spear as an embroidery needle. However, the embroidery needle was as powerful as a spear. The combination of the two brought a lot of pressure to Chunzong. Sure enough, a 7-star expert with top-notch combat strength was not to be underestimated. His strength was extremely shocking. However, such an opponent would make one's blood boil. Without activating the freedom state, Chunzong fought with his normal state and strength. In close-range combat, he performed his sword techniques to the extreme. He did not seem to be at a disadvantage at all. The sword light was endless. It was either flicking, cutting, or slashing. It constantly dissolved the opponent's powerful attacks. At the same time, it was counterattacking. Every strike was able to tear apart the opponent's chi and threaten King Manchon's life. Chapter 1771. The clouds in the sky were vast and mighty, and the terrifying energy tore them into pieces. A fierce battle. The battle between the top 7-star combatants was extremely intense. Chunzong treated Barbarian Mountain King as a training target, while Barbarian Mountain King wanted to survive. The improvement in his cultivation, Dao insight, sword technique, and various other aspects allowed Chen Zong's strength to advance by leaps and bounds. Even if he fought a formidable expert like King Manshan, he wouldn't fall into a disadvantageous position in the slightest. Under his formidable cultivation, Dao insight, and exceedingly high attainments in sword techniques, even if it was only an ordinary sword strike, it would still be able to erupt with extremely shocking might. The more they fought, the more shocked King Manshan was. At the same time, he was filled with doubts. Different. It was different from the previous battle. This person's swordsmanship was also different. It did not mean that the swordsmanship was different, but the style was different. Different swordsmanship only meant that he had practiced many different swordsmanship. Different styles meant different concepts of swordsmanship. Compared to the previous person, this person only looked the same, but they were not the same person. In fact, King Manshan's guess was right. Chen Zong and Chen Xiu were indeed two different people. Chen Zong was completely immersed in the battle, further mastering his strength that had increased by leaps and bounds. Although he had not entered the state of self-freedom, the feeling of gradually mastering all his strength was wonderful. Chen Zong's powerful body refining cultivation gave him an extraordinary physique. Not only could he withstand more powerful attacks, but he also had stronger stamina and endurance, so he could withstand longer battles. King Manshan's physique was also very strong, but it was only a side effect of his cultivation method. It was not as strong as Chen Zong's. When the brutal fist collided with Chen Zong's sword, the power carried by the sword instantly exploded, as if it was going to destroy King Manshan. Every time, King Manshan would feel his arms tremble slightly. Once or twice was nothing, but when it happened too many times, his arms gradually became numb and his reaction slowed down. Heart-intent sword style, heartbeat. In an instant, Chen Zong struck out with his sword. He didn't seem to be in any position, but the moment he thought about it, the sword light had already condensed into a single point and was aimed directly at King Manshan's heart. The Barbarian Mountain King felt his heart tremble violently. It was as if his blood essence was flowing in reverse. His strength was instantly impacted, and he paused for a moment. The sword had already arrived. This sword was created based on the line of heaven and earth. It had the extreme speed and astonishing sharpness of the line of heaven and earth, and it also had an indescribable power that could guide one's mind. However, the Barbarian Mountain Lord wasn't someone the Blood-Kill Lord could compare to. Even in the face of danger, he was able to react quickly. All of his power burst out in an instant. His entire body seemed to have expanded by a large size. A terrifying aura burst out like a mountain flood, rushing in all directions. The Barbarian Mountain King roared like a giant beast. He gathered all the strength in his body. His blood and qi flowed in the opposite direction. His face instantly turned red. He pushed the mountain with his palms and blasted it forward with terrifying power. However, the power of this palm was directly pierced through by the heart-stirring sword. It pressed forward with an irresistible force. The Barbarian Mountain King's body shook. He quickly retreated and narrowly avoided the heart-stirring sword. At that moment, he felt as if his heart had been pierced. Heart-stirring sword. Chen Zong stabbed out with his sword again. A touch of crimson spread out. It was the power of the Blood Thunder Force. This sword was even more powerful with the help of the Blood Thunder Force. He couldn't completely avoid this sword. However, his subconscious that had been tempered thousands of times completely broke out in this life and death crisis. He turned his body slightly to avoid the vital parts, but his shoulder was instantly pierced by the sunken knight sword. Die! Enduring the pain of his shoulder being pierced, the Barbarian Mountain King tightened his shoulder muscles and clamped the sunken knight's sword in an instant. He raised his right hand, and the large veins on his arm were entrenched like pythons. Terrifying power poured into it, and he punched out with the intent of a unique skill. The mountain moved horizontally and collapsed in an instant. The world was shaken. Chen Zong was shocked by this punch. If he was hit, no matter how strong his body was, he wouldn't be able to withstand it. He would be seriously injured in an instant or even killed. Suddenly, the sunken knight's sword that was clamped by the barbarian mountain king's shoulder was pulled out smoothly. The black and white sword light shone in an instant and surrounded Chen Zong's body, turning into a black and white wheel. It seemed slow, but it was actually extremely fast. It rotated like lightning. The first move of the yin-yang sword technique. Yin-yang sword wheel. This move was based on the mystery of the yin and yang sword realm and incorporated many other mysteries, especially the mystery of the martial arts of the lineage of heaven and earth. Finally, it was self-created. The yin-yang sword wheel not only had the amazing defensive power of the yin and yang sword realm, but also carried a rebounding force. As long as an attack fell on it, not only would it be blocked by the defense, but part of the force would also be rebounded and hit the attacker. The power of the barbarian mountain king's punch was extremely strong. It directly hit the yin-yang sword wheel and was immediately blocked. At the same time, the rotating yin-yang sword wheel trembled slightly and a force was immediately guided. It circled around the yin-yang sword wheel and rushed toward the barbarian mountain king. This force was equal to half of the force of the barbarian mountain king's punch. It was also very powerful. Caught off guard, the barbarian mountain king's body trembled, and he was forced to retreat. Heart-intent sword style, heart-stirring. The moment the barbarian mountain king was hit by the rebounding force of the yin-yang sword wheel, Chen Zong immediately changed his sword move and performed the heart-stirring move again. The barbarian mountain king was hit by the rebounding force of the yin-yang sword wheel. His heart trembled and he couldn't avoid this sword move. Mercilessly, a streak of sword light shot out like a dark star and penetrated the barbarian mountain king's heart in an instant. The extremely terrifying sword chi exploded from the barbarian mountain king's heart and killed him instantly. As long as the barbarian mountain king was made of flesh and blood, the barbarian mountain king's heart was a weak point. Although the attack wouldn't kill him directly, it would still injure him. Moreover, the barbarian mountain king's heart was not only pierced but also minced. Of course, with the barbarian mountain king's strength, he wouldn't die immediately even if his heart was minced. However, he felt that all the power in his body was rapidly draining away. "Master won't let you go." The barbarian mountain king roared angrily and gathered the last of his power to reverse the flow and rush into his chi sea. He was about to explode immediately. Even if he died, he wanted to drag Chen Zong down with him. At the very least, he wanted to injure him and make him miserable. Unexpectedly, Chen Zong sensed the barbarian mountain king's intention. Without hesitation, he swung his sword. The dark sword light tore through the void and swept past the barbarian mountain king's neck. Decapitation. He was an expert, ranked 6th on the Taishan Supreme Saint board. Now, he was killed by a junior who was much younger than him. It was a tragedy. Originally, he didn't need to die. Since he couldn't get the whereabouts of the Rakshasa king from the other party, and the other party was so determined to explode and drag him down with him, he could only act decisively and kill him. After killing him, the storage ring of the barbarian mountain king would naturally belong to Chen Zong. In the next moment, Chen Zong's figure disappeared and appeared on Bewildering Light Island. With my current combat strength, I don't even fear an ordinary 8-star expert, Chen Zong thought to himself. To be able to contend with an ordinary 8-star expert, his improvement was not small. Chen Zong was even confident that he could survive against an elite 8-star expert. As for 9-star experts, they were extremely rare. In the entire Taishan realm, there was only one known. Perhaps there were more in secret, but definitely not many. It was too difficult to increase one's combat strength at the level of a half-step great saint. Now, it's time to settle the grudges of the past. Chen Zong thought to himself as a cold smile appeared on his face. Tian Mingzi of the Thousand Spirit Pavilion. There were also some half-step great saints from the Upper Yuan realm who had forced him into a corner, and the 5 bewildering light saints who had taken him hostage and forced him to escape into the bewildering light sea. Even though he didn't die after entering the bewildering light ocean, and even obtained an incredible opportunity that allowed his cultivation and strength to advance by leaps and bounds, allowing him to soar to the point where he could kill an elite 7-star warrior in less than 10 years, grudges were grudges, and it was time to settle them. Only then would his heart be clear. Now, with the strength of Chen Zong's divine mind, he could freely appear anywhere in the Taishan realm or the Upper Yuan realm. If one day, his divine mind was further strengthened, he might be able to use the power of the bewildering light realm to appear anywhere in the Tianyuan sacred region. This was much more powerful than the Void Temple. The Void Temple had a mysterious origin. It seemed to have a great saint expert behind it, and its forces were spread across the Tianyuan sacred region. But there was one thing. The Void Temple couldn't teleport between realms. He didn't know if it was because they couldn't teleport or because they didn't want to. After all, there was a natural chasm between realms. For example, between the Xianyuan realm and the Upper Yuan realm was the Sunken Bone Abyss. Between the Upper Yuan realm and the Taishan realm was the Bewildering Light Sea. But within a realm, the Void Temple's teleportation was extremely fast. Previously, Chen Zong didn't use the Void Temple's teleportation because he wanted to train himself. But now, he didn't need to use the Void Temple. In an instant, Chen Zong appeared in the Upper Yuan realm. He didn't act immediately, but first recovered his exhausted divine mind. The spirit control technique was activated, and the power of his divine mind was recovered at an astonishing speed. When his divine mind was fully recovered, Chen Zong began to enter the city. The reason why he didn't appear directly in the city was to avoid causing unnecessary panic. Back then, he was surrounded by many experts because of Tian Mingzi from the Wanling Pavilion. This grudge had to be settled. Tian Mingzi was the beginning of the disaster. Kill. However, he didn't know where Tian Mingzi was. So, he could only enter the city and find the Wanling Pavilion to ask directly. With something to rely on, there was no need to be secretive. The thing to rely on was one's own strength. The overall strength of the Upper Yuan realm was not as good as that of the Taishan realm. In the entire Upper Yuan realm, there had never been a 9-star expert. At most, there were elite 8-star experts. In addition, although the Wanling Pavilion was very powerful, it was not the top force. Soon, Chen Zong entered the city, walked to the door of the Wanling Pavilion, and stepped directly in. Chapter 1772. The abyss in the profound world seemed to be bottomless. Inside the pitch-black cave, that ball of darkness was so deep that it seemed like a heart was beating endlessly. Dead. Both the left and right emissaries are dead. Who killed you? In the depths of the darkness, a terrifying roar, full of anger and murderous intent, sounded like it came from the Ghost King of the 9 Hells. Lord Bloodclaw and Lord Manshan had spent hundreds of years, countless efforts, and the lives of tens of thousands of cultivators. He had even risked his life to obtain opportunities to finally cultivate them. It had also proven that Lord Manshan and Lord Bloodclaw were very outstanding. They had earned a lot of wealth for him and provided him with endless cultivation resources. Under certain circumstances, a top 7-star battle strength was enough to run rampant in the Tianyuan sacred territory. He had asked them to deal with a junior, but now they were dead. Who was it that killed them? Was it an 8-star powerhouse who did it? He knew very well that there were not many 8-star powerhouses in the profound world. On the surface, there were only 4, including himself. Perhaps there were more in secret, but they were all from the top forces. Under normal circumstances, Lord Bloodclaw and Lord Manshan would not provoke the top forces. Could it be that the Shura sect had joined a top force? When I succeed, all of you will die. Rakshasa King let out a furious roar that reverberated endlessly in the pitch-black cave. Chunzong found that the people of the Myriad Spirit Pavilion would not cooperate at all without using some means. Therefore, he had to show his tyrannical force to force the people of the Myriad Spirit Pavilion to hand over Tianmingzi. Of course, Chunzong did not hurt anyone. Who dares to behave atrociously in my Myriad Spirit Pavilion? The angry roar exploded in the hall of the Myriad Spirit Pavilion like thunder, and a tyrannical aura filled the air. The powerhouse guarding the Myriad Spirit Pavilion had arrived. His aura was clearly at the level of a half-step great saint. Moreover, he was a 2-star powerhouse. This astonishing aura swept across like a storm. Soon after, it charged towards Chunzong and locked onto him. For a Saint Realm powerhouse, it was a terrifying and destructive aura, but for Chunzong, it was like a breeze. Therefore, the other party was secretly afraid. Who are you? Why are you looking for Elder Tianmingzi? The middle-aged man in a short coat stared at Chunzong vigilantly and said in a low voice, "You don't need to know anything. Just tell me where Tianmingzi is, or ask Tianmingzi to come here," Chunzong replied calmly. At the same time, he released a trace of his aura. This strand of aura was extremely terrifying. It was like a heavenly sword suspended in the air, instantly striking down. It made the other party's hair stand on end, as if his entire body was pierced through. In the face of this aura, all of his resistance was completely crushed. An expert. This was a terrifyingly strong expert. In an instant, the guardian of the Wan Ling Association understood. Cold sweat oozed from his forehead and flowed down his cheek. "Sir, I do not know where Elder Tianmingzi is." This person replied with difficulty. When the difference in strength was too great, he didn't dare to take any chances. The Wan Ling Association is the most well-informed. I believe you must know. Chunzong sighed leisurely. In fact, I'm only looking for Tianmingzi. I don't want to be enemies with the Wan Ling Association, but if you are not willing to cooperate, the Wan Ling Association will be in trouble. Hearing this, the other party's expression suddenly changed, as if he was weighing the pros and cons. The other party was very strong. Just his aura alone made him feel like he was about to be destroyed. This meant that the other party's combat strength was at least at the 4-star level, or even higher. Although it was rumored that the Wan Ling Association had a supreme great saint as its backer, it was impossible to determine whether it was true or not. Even if it was true, it was a matter of a long time ago. Moreover, supreme great saint powerhouses would not intervene in fights below the great saint realm, unless the Wan Ling Association was in danger of being destroyed. Everything else was false. For now, the best thing to do was to deal with this person. I really don't know where Elder Tianmingzi is, but please give me some time. I'll report this matter now, the person hurriedly said. All right, it's best to find someone with enough weight, Chunzong said unhurriedly as he looked at the other party meaningfully. Indeed, according to the Wan Ling Association, they had the support of a supreme great saint realm powerhouse. However, at Chunzong's level, he could see things more clearly. If there was really a supreme great saint realm powerhouse, he would not act rashly. Just like Yang Kai right now, if the conflict between Saint Realm Masters did not go too far, he would not intervene because of the difference in levels. Moreover, it was not like he did not have a trump card. The Eternal Heaven and Earth Token. When his consciousness entered the Eternal Battle Fort and returned to his body, there was an additional power in the Eternal Heaven and Earth Token. It was a protective power that the Eternal Battle Fort used to protect King Stage geniuses. A battle between people of the same level. Naturally, the protective power in the Eternal Heaven and Earth Token would not be activated. However, if an illuminating God powerhouse attacked him, the power of the eternal heaven and earth token would appear to protect him. Of course, the power in the eternal heaven and earth token could only resist and repel low-level illuminating God powerhouses. According to Huaji, the supreme Great Saint Realm powerhouses in the Tian Yuan sacred territory should belong to the low-level illuminating God realm. In other words, the supreme Great Saint Realm powerhouses could no longer threaten him in the Tian Yuan sacred territory. This was actually the Eternal Battle Fort's way of attaching importance to King Stage geniuses. After all, there were not many King Stage geniuses. The death of one would be a great loss. Waiting. Chernzong was waiting for the Wan Ling Association's response. Azura Sect, Tai Luo City, Tai Xian World. Chen Xiu walked out of the Azura secret realm with his essence, qi, and spirit completely restored to their peak. Send out a notice that the Barbarian Mountain King and the Blood Claw King have been executed. Those who broke their oath during the sect's crisis have to come to the Azura sect to confess within 3 days. Chen Xiu said unhurriedly, but his words were filled with coldness. Those who don't come within the time limit, don't blame my sword for not showing mercy. Previously, those people would rather break their oath in order to survive because the Blood Claw King's ferocity was too great. Now that the Blood Claw King was killed by Chen Xiu, it meant that Chen Xiu was stronger than the Blood Claw King. Moreover, the Barbarian Mountain King was also killed. Although there was no mention of who killed the Barbarian Mountain King, it seemed to have something to do with the Azura sect. Would such a Shura sect strike fear in others? Yes. Chen Xiu believed that once this news was released, those who were afraid of death would rush to the Azura sect. If they did not come, the only consequence would be death. His sword was merciless. Those people came from the Bewildering Light Island and had the mark of the Bewildering Light Island on their bodies. They were not aware of it, but Chen Xiu could feel it clearly. In the Flying Spirit City's Wan Ling Association, Chernzong sat leisurely and waited. Then, a few sharp gazes stared at Chernzong as if they wanted to pierce through him. 3 people. There were 3 people in total. 2 of them were old men, and one was a middle-aged man with white hair. All of them exuded a powerful aura. Half-step Great Saint Realm. Moreover, judging from their aura, the battle strength of these 3 people was not low. The 2 old men were 4-star warriors, and the middle-aged man was 5-star warriors. As for whether they were ordinary warriors or elite warriors, it could only be determined by fighting. The 3 powerful auras locked onto Chernzong, intending to suppress Chernzong. However, Chernzong did not seem to notice them. He did not move an inch, and his expression was calm. This attitude of his made the 3 people wary. Although the Wan Ling Association was well informed, Chernzong had entered the Bewildering Light Sea a few years ago. According to what the Wan Ling Association knew, those who entered the Bewildering Light Sea had never come out. Therefore, they would not associate the person in front of them with Chernzong. Generally speaking, a confrontation of auras could determine the strength of the other party. However, in the face of the 3 people's auras, the other party looked calm and unfathomable. How should I address you? The middle-aged man with 5-star warriors cupped his hands and asked with a smile. Where's Tian Mingzi? Chernzong asked back. Why are you looking for Tian Mingzi? The middle-aged man asked again. His tone was gentle, as if he was talking to a friend. To settle a grudge. Chernzong did not beat around the bush and said directly. But do you know what grudge you have with Elder Tian Mingzi? The middle-aged man asked again with a smile. If it's not a big grudge, the Wan Ling Association is willing to pay the appropriate price to resolve it. Who are you? Chernzong asked back. I'm Bai Lingzi, the Vice Pavilion Master of the General Pavilion of the Myriad Spirit Pavilion. These 2 are the elders of the General Pavilion of the Myriad Spirit Pavilion, the middle-aged man said with a smile, as if he had come to make friends. The other party's attitude was gentle, without the slightest impatience. The tone of his voice made people feel closer to him, and they could not help but have a good impression of him. He was indeed not an ordinary person. The grudge between me and Tianmingzi is a matter of life and death. How can the Wan Ling Association bear it? Chen Zong could not help but smile. Junior, you think too highly of yourself just because you have a few tricks up your sleeve. The Wan Ling Association never looks for trouble, but we are not afraid of trouble. One of the elders seemed to be unable to stand it and scolded angrily. Although the other elder did not speak, he also released a strong aura with a bit of evil spirit. Elders, please don't be impatient. Everything can be resolved. Bai Lingzi smiled and said. Immediately, he looked at Chernzong and said, regardless of the grudge between you and our pavilion's elder Tianmingzi, from the way I see it, it can be resolved as long as you state your conditions. Tianmingzi's life, Chernzong said calmly. This time, he came to settle the grudge. The way to settle the grudge was simple and direct, which was to kill Tianmingzi. Other than that, there was nothing else to say. Wealth? No need. He had a lot of wealth and it was enough. Moreover, he had seen a wider world and his ambition was high. He was no longer limited to this. After settling the grudge this time, when the eternal heaven and earth token could be used again, he would go to the eternal battle fort again. That was where he pursued the path of cultivation. Chapter 1773. It's raining during the Qingming festival. Please be careful when you go back to worship your ancestors. Bai Lingzi had a headache. He had always prided himself on his eloquence. When he dealt with the matters of the Myriad Spirit Pavilion, he prioritized peace. He would avoid violence if he could. With his eloquence and ability, he was often able to smoothly deal with many things that were difficult to deal with in the eyes of others, causing others to be convinced. This time, the chief pavilion master had asked him to come because he valued his ability. The Myriad Spirit Pavilion was a business. They had never clashed with other forces and prioritized peace. Of course, if it was an enemy, the Myriad Spirit Pavilion would not show mercy. It would be best if it could be resolved peacefully. However, Bai Lingzi realized that no matter what he said and how hard he tried, the other party was unmoved. His attitude was obvious and firm. He wanted Tianmingzi's life. He meant what he said, and his hidden sharpness was extremely shocking. Bai Lingzi could only feel his head throbbing, and his headache worsened. Sir, the Myriad Spirit Pavilion has been standing for thousands of years and has encountered countless crises. But in the end, the Myriad Spirit Pavilion still exists and is getting stronger and stronger. Bai Lingzi's smile was restrained, and his tone was a little solemn with a hint of killing intent. Bai Lingzi had a 5-star battle prowess. This battle prowess was not something that could be said with words. It was something that could be achieved through real cultivation and battle. He was eloquent and prioritized peace, but it did not mean that he would not be angry, and it did not mean that he would not fight and kill. Then this time, it may be the biggest crisis in the history of the Myriad Spirit Pavilion. Chernzong did not care about the other party's threat at all and smiled nonchalantly. Even if the supreme saint behind the Myriad Spirit Pavilion really did not care about his reputation and attacked, he was not afraid. If the Myriad Spirit Pavilion had a 9-star combat strength expert, he could escape instantly and enter Bewildering Light Island even if he could not fight. He had strength to rely on, a way out, and a powerful force to protect him. He was almost absolutely safe here. In the past, when he only had strength, he dared to fight, let alone now. With all kinds of things to rely on, how could he be afraid? Hearing Chen Zong's words, Bai Lingzi's face darkened, and the 2 chief pavilion elders were instantly enraged. Boom! His aura was violent, like a torrent bursting through a dam, pouring down on Chen Zong. Since the Myriad Spirit Pavilion won't hand over Tianmingzi, let's fight until they do. Chernzong snickered coldly. His eyes shone with a sharp light. His overbearing aura swept across the sky like a heavenly sword, exploding in an instant and suppressing the world. The horrifying power of a 7-star battle power instantly fell on Bai Lingzi and the 2 elders of the General Pavilion. It was as if the universe's sword was rushing toward them like an ancient sword mountain. Suppress. Bai Lingzi and the other 2 were horrified. How could this be? How could he be so powerful? Even the chief pavilion master did not have such a powerful aura. In their minds, there seemed to be a sword mountain pressing down on the world. It was as if a beam of sword light had torn the universe apart and arrived. Everything would be suppressed, and everything would be penetrated. In the face of such terrifying power, he could only tremble. A strong enemy. This was a strong enemy. As Chernzong said, the Myriad Spirit Pavilion had really encountered the biggest crisis this time. Your Excellency, let's talk nicely. Bai Lingzi immediately put on a smile and lowered his head slightly. There was no other way. The aura that Chernzong exuded was too powerful. It directly suppressed them. If they wanted to attack, they would probably be killed in an instant. The 2 elders of the General Pavilion, who were furious also, did not dare to act rashly. I'll repeat it again. Hand over Tianmingzi. Chernzong's eyes flashed with a cold light. His tone was abrupt, but it was as if the sword qi had directly pierced their hearts. They instantly shrank and were extremely frightened. Bai Lingzi's perception was very sharp. He could feel a trace of determination from Chernzong's tone. This was the other party's ultimatum. If they violated it, they would really enrage the other party. Bai Lingzi's head hurt. He thought quickly and thought of a solution. His head hurt. Tianmingzi was indeed a half-step great saint expert, but he was only at the 3-star level. In the entire Myriad Spirit Pavilion, he could only be regarded as a mid-level expert. The Myriad Spirit Pavilion would not be strengthened much with one more, nor would it be weakened much with one less. But the most important thing was the reputation of the Myriad Spirit Pavilion. If they were forced to hand over an elder, it would be a big blow to the Myriad Spirit Pavilion. The reputation that the Myriad Spirit Pavilion had built up over the years would be damaged. A tree lived by its bark, while a person lived by his face. As a powerful force in the Upper Yuan realm, the Myriad Spirit Pavilion naturally valued its reputation very much. In fact, reputation was something that every sect and every force valued. But in the current situation, if they did not hand over Tianmingzi, the Myriad Spirit Pavilion would not only lose its reputation, but also other things. Could it be that they really wanted the great saint expert behind the Myriad Spirit Pavilion to take action? That was impossible. Why would a great saint expert care about such a small matter? Moreover, as the deputy pavilion master of the General Pavilion, Bai Lingzi knew better. The great saint expert behind the Myriad Spirit Pavilion was rumored to have been on good terms with the General Pavilion master of the Myriad Spirit Pavilion a long time ago. He had already left many years ago. As long as the Myriad Spirit Pavilion did not suffer a destructive blow, the great saint expert would never appear. The great saint expert was like a tiger's skin that could scare people. The 2 elders were waiting for Bai Lingzi's decision. Fight? Or surrender? They had to make a decision. Tianmingzi is not in the Myriad Spirit Pavilion now. Bai Lingzi seemed to have thought it through and suddenly said in a deflated manner. The Myriad Spirit Pavilion is the most well-informed, isn't it? Chernzong asked in return. Tianmingzi is in the Thousand Origin Cave now, Bai Lingzi said. Bai Lingzi continued to speak. Soon after, a cold glint filled his eyes and his tone became harsh and cold. I have already told you the news. It has nothing to do with my Myriad Spirit Pavilion. As for the future, if you continue to be so persistent, my Myriad Spirit Pavilion will not fear you. You have to know that the consequences of deceiving me are not something you can bear, Chernzong replied unhurriedly and got up to leave. His target was only Tianmingzi. As for the Myriad Spirit Pavilion, he did not want to be enemies. Of course, if the myriad spirit pavilion did not know what was good for them, he would fight and kill them. But now, the myriad spirit pavilion was quite cooperative. Everyone was happy. Of course, the people of the myriad spirit pavilion must be very sullen. When one's power was stronger than one's, one would be crushed. This was what strength brought about. Looking at the back of Qinzong, a touch of darkness flashed across Bai Lingzi's eyes. He felt humiliated and helpless. Immediately, he left with the two elders. The Thousand Origin Cave was very famous in the Upper Yuan realm. Often, cultivators would go to the Thousand Origin Cave to look for the so-called opportunities. There were really cultivators who found opportunities to improve themselves. The reason why Tian Mingzi came to the Thousand Origin Cave was to look for opportunities to improve himself. A few years ago, he wanted to avenge his brother, Tian Lingzi. In the end, not only did he not succeed, but he also lost an arm and was seriously injured. He did not take the severed arm with him. Otherwise, he would only need to pay a small price to reattach it. Without that severed arm, it was not impossible for him to regrow a new arm. However, it would consume too much energy. With his current accumulation, it was impossible for him to do so. However, because he was an elder of the Myriad Spirit Pavilion, he found out that the Thousand Origin Cave might have a sacred medicine that could regenerate flesh and bones. After recovering from his injuries, he personally went to the Thousand Origin Cave to look for it. It was just that many years had passed, and he had found many spirit herbs and sacred herbs, but he had not found any sacred herbs that could regenerate flesh and bones. However, Tian Mingzi did not plan to give up. He had to find it and restore his arm. Otherwise, his power would be greatly affected. Because of this, Tian Mingzi had been staying in the Thousand Origin Cave all these years. Naturally, he was not well informed about the outside world. Therefore, he did not know that he was about to face a great disaster. Soon, Qinzong arrived outside the Thousand Origin Cave. The Thousand Origin Caves was a general term because there were many caves in this area. There were hundreds of them, and they covered an area of over 100,000 miles. The hundreds of caves were called the Thousand Origin Cave. Some of the caves were very long, tens of thousands of miles. Some were very short, less than 1,000 miles. However, no matter how long or short the caves were, one or a few of them were connected to each other. It was like a huge maze. Therefore, once one entered the Thousand Origin Cave and did not leave, it was not easy to find out about the outside world. Also, the Thousand Origin Cave was so big that it was not easy to find a person. It was like looking for a needle in a haystack. In the end, Bai Lingzi chose to tell Qinzong the news. First, it was because of the situation. Second, it was because the Thousand Origin Cave's terrain was complicated. It would not be easy to find Tian Mingzi. If he was really found, it would be Tian Mingzi's misfortune. Grudges should be settled. The Myriad Spirit Pavilion could not stand up for Tian Mingzi. Otherwise, it would only invite disaster. Although the Thousand Origin Cave had hundreds of caves and hundreds of entrances, there was one main entrance. If one waited at the main entrance, they could intercept him. However, they could not be sure when he would leave. They might only have to wait for a short period of time, or they might have to wait for years or even decades. Of course, Qinzong could not wait at the main entrance for Tian Mingzi to appear. He did not know how long he would have to wait. It might even be many years. He did not have that much time to waste. However, he was not alone. He still had his doppelganger. Soon, Chen Xiu's doppelganger rushed from the profound realm to the upper primordial realm through the power of bewildering light island. Of course, the doppelganger made some changes so that no one could tell that it was the same as the original. The doppelganger stood guard at the main entrance of the Thousand Origin Cave while the original entered it. There were hundreds of caves. Qinzong did not know where to find Tian Mingzi. He could only enter and search. At the same time, he could ask others for information. He chose a random cave entrance and stepped inside. The air inside flowed faster than outside. The fluctuation of the chi of heaven and earth was also more intense. From time to time there would be the sound of wind blowing. It was so mighty that it seemed to penetrate one's eardrums. Chapter 1774. I found this green leaf sky blue first. Are you going to take it by force? This voice was filled with anger and unwillingness. Heavenly materials and earthly treasures belong to those who are fated. Strength is fate. Another voice was filled with sneers. There were hundreds of caves in the Thousand Origin Cave. Because of the abnormal world Yuan Qi, there were many precious herbs that could not be found in the outside world. In the early days, one could easily find precious herbs in any of the cave. The lowest grade was spirit herbs and the highest grade was saint herbs. But after many years, countless cultivators poured in to search for precious herbs. Gradually, precious herbs became fewer and more difficult to find. Some of the precious herbs had even become peerless. As the saying goes, the rarer something is, the more valuable it is. Once it became peerless and difficult to obtain, its value would soar. When a lucky person found a rare precious herb in the Thousand Origin Cave and sold it for a high price, it would attract more people. Of course, the vast majority of those who entered the Thousand Origin Cave to search for treasures were in the saint realm, with a very small number of them being half-step great saints. As for those in the transcendent realm, even if they managed to obtain some treasures, they might suffer because of them. There were many conflicts like the one just now. After entering the Thousand Origin Cave, Chen Zong had encountered many such conflicts. However, these had nothing to do with Chen Zong, so he ignored them. Find Tianmingzi. Chen Zong only had one purpose in entering the Thousand Origin Cave, and that was to find Tianmingzi and kill him directly to settle this grudge. When the grudge was settled, one's mind would be clear. One would not think about it and there would be no regrets. It was like wiping away a speck of dust in one's heart. Only when one's heart was clear could one be free of obstacles. The Thousand Origin Cave was very large. There were hundreds of caves, winding around like a large maze. Looking for a person inside was like looking for a needle in a haystack. Chen Zong was extremely fast. A 7-star realm master was like an aurora. With his divine sense, there was no need for him to stop. Many people were searching for precious herbs when they suddenly felt a breeze pass by them. They could not see the person at all. Chen Zong's speed was very fast. The short cave was only a few hundred miles long, so he could finish searching it in no time. The long cave was at most 10,000 miles long. In fact, it was not a big deal. He just needed to spend a little more time. Chen Zong was checking the cave step by step, just like a carpet search. It might take more time, but he could avoid missing anything. For example, if he didn't find the target after he finished searching here, and then went to search the other caves, the target would enter a cave that had already been searched. A cave. 2 caves. 3 caves. Chen Zong kept searching while Chen Xiu stood guard at the main entrance. The 18th cave was more than 8,000 miles long. It was full of twists and turns. Chen Zong suddenly stopped. His eyes flickered with a hint of surprise. He didn't find Tianmingzi, but he found someone who also needed to settle his grudges. In the depths of the cave it was pitch black. The yuan qi of heaven and earth flowed at an abnormal speed, like gusts of wind blowing. This was the depths of the cave. It was completely dark, causing the wind to become gloomy and cold. However, in this darkness there was someone. 5. There were a total of 5 people. Each of them emitted a shocking aura. It was obvious that they were 5 powerhouses, the 5 mystifying light saints. These 5 people were the owners of the mystifying light ship in the mystifying light sea, the 5 mystifying light saints. In the past, after they kidnapped Chen Zong, they were attacked by Chen Zong's clone. They successfully escaped into the mystifying light sea and lost track of Chen Zong. However, the others thought that the 5 of them had kidnapped Chen Zong and obtained the secret of his clone. During that time, the 5 of them fled in all directions like rats. However, the 5 mystifying light saints' strength was not ordinary. Moreover, they were capable. When they joined forces, they became even more powerful. They survived danger after danger. Later on, the 5 of them even split up and changed their appearances. They actually avoided a lot of trouble for a time. The 5 of them also hid in the 1,000 Origin Cave. With their strength and methods, and the complicated terrain of the 1,000 Origin Cave, as long as it wasn't an eminent saint powerhouse, it wouldn't be easy for a half-step eminent saint to find their whereabouts. Unless it was a large-scale operation. However, no one knew that the 5 of them had entered the 1,000 Origin Cave. After all, they had split up when they entered and changed their appearances. Chen Zong was very surprised. His purpose in entering the 1,000 Origin Cave was to find Tian Mingzi and kill him. Then, he would look for the 5 mystifying light saints. He didn't expect to find the 5 mystifying light saints here first. Although the 5 mystifying light saints had changed their appearances, their aura fluctuations didn't change much. Chen Zong had already remembered them clearly. A cold smile hung on the corner of Chen Zong's mouth. His eyes flashed with a cold light as he flew out like a bolt of lightning. Since he found the 5 mystifying light saints first, he would get rid of them first. Who's there? The 5 mystifying light saints were very vigilant. As soon as Chen Zong approached, he triggered the alarm they had set up. 5 tyrannical auras erupted at the same time and swept across like a storm. Everyone, it's been a long time. Chen Zong smiled faintly. The gloomy darkness here was nothing to half-step great sage experts. Therefore, the 5 mystifying light saints' eyes glowed as they stared at Chen Zong's face. It's you. The 5 mystifying light saints also recognized Chen Zong. They exclaimed in shock and horror. How was this possible? Didn't he escape into the mystifying light ocean? How could he appear here? Could it be that he could leave the mystifying light ocean? For a moment, countless thoughts flashed through the 5 mystifying light saints' minds. The mystifying light ocean had always been extremely mysterious. No one had ever heard of anyone who entered leaving. However, this person could leave. Perhaps he had obtained a great opportunity inside. Take him down. The leader of the 5 mystifying light saints immediately shouted. The 5 of them attacked like lightning. If they took him down, not only would they force him to reveal the secret of his doppelganger, they would also force him to reveal the secret of the mystifying light ocean. A great opportunity. That's right, Chen Zong could leave the mystifying light ocean because he had obtained a great opportunity inside. Seeing the 5 mystifying light saints coming from all directions, Chen Zong had a smile on his face. The 5 mystifying light saints were not weak. 3 of them had the combat strength of a 3-star elite, 1 was an ordinary 4-star elite, and 1 was a 4-star elite. When they joined forces to form a formation, they could contend against a 5-star elite. However, Chen Zong's combat strength was not something a 5-star elite could compare to. Chen Zong originally wanted to kill all 5 of them with one strike. However, he suddenly changed his mind. It would be too easy for them if he killed them just like that. Instead of killing them, he would throw them into the mystifying light ocean and let them experience the dangers of the mystifying light ocean. With a change of mind, Chen Zong made up his mind and immediately attacked. He did not draw his sword. There was no need to draw his sword to deal with these 5 people. Using his finger as a sword, he instantly pierced through the void and split into 5 directions. In an instant, the 5 people's attacks were directly broken. The terrifying power penetrated everything and directly hit the 5 people's bodies. The terrifying power instantly spread out and hit their bodies. In an instant, all of their strength was destroyed and they lost all ability to resist. If Chen Zong wanted to, He could have killed them on the spot. The mystifying light ocean's ship master has been traveling back and forth between the mystifying light ocean all year round. You must be very curious about the mystifying light ocean. Chen Zong's voice suddenly sounded with a hint of mockery. When it entered the 5 mystifying light saints' ears, they immediately had a bad premonition. At this moment, the 5 mystifying light saints were terrified. One strike. In just one strike, the 5 of them were defeated. How was this possible? In the next moment, the 5 of them felt the world spinning as if they had traveled through time and space. When they came to their senses, they found that the 5 of them were in a place that had changed greatly. Gray fog spread in all directions, and their bodies were falling rapidly. However, their strength had recovered and they could use it again. They quickly stopped and stood in the air. Where is this? The second brother of the 5 mystifying light saints looked around. He could only see the endless gray fog. He had a familiar feeling, but he couldn't remember where. The other 4 also looked around. They also felt that the gray fog looked very familiar. Their divine sense spread out in an instant, but they found that it was greatly restricted. This place, could it be? The 5th brother of the 5 mystifying light saints seemed to have thought of something. His pupils suddenly shrank to the size of needles. Impossible! The 4th brother also thought of something, but he shook his head repeatedly. Illusion. This must be an illusion. We must have fallen into his illusion. The 3rd brother of the 5 mystifying light saints said with certainty. After all, they all recognized that this was the mystifying light ocean. Their mystifying light ocean's ship had sailed on the mystifying light ocean for many years. They were very familiar with the environment here. There was no doubt that this was the environment of the mystifying light ocean. A breath ago, they were still in the Thousand Origin Cave, and in the next breath, they appeared in the mystifying light ocean. It was completely impossible. After all, the distance between the Thousand Origin Cave and the mystifying light ocean was very far. It would take them quite some time to arrive at the mystifying light ocean with their speed. Besides that, how could the other party directly send them from the Thousand Origin Cave to the mystifying light ocean? There was only one explanation, and it was an illusion. It was an illusion created by the other party using some kind of illusion technique or some kind of secret treasure to make them mistakenly think that they had entered the mystifying light ocean. Since they knew it was an illusion, they would see through it and leave this place. Little did they know that this wasn't an illusion, but the real mystifying light ocean. With the current strength of Chen Zong's divine sense, he was completely capable of sending all 5 of them into the mystifying light ocean without exhausting all of his divine sense. This was Chen Zong's revenge. He made them enter the mystifying light ocean personally, experience the dangers of the mystifying light ocean, and die in the end. He had already grasped the mystifying light realm and controlled the mystifying light island. The mystifying light ocean was like his own backyard to him. Everything was under his control. However, if he found Tianmingzi, Chen Zong didn't intend to take revenge like this. Instead, he would directly kill Tianmingzi. He recovered his exhausted divine sense while continuing to search for Tianmingzi's whereabouts. As for the 5 mystifying light saints, they also began their operation in the mystifying light ocean. Chapter 1775. Tianmingzi was resting in a cave within the Thousand Origin Cave. After searching for so many years, it was a pity that the sacred medicine for rebuilding bones and muscles was too rare. He had only heard that it existed inside, but no one had found it for many years. The sacred medicine for rebuilding bones and muscles was incomparably expensive. Even with his wealth, he could not afford it. He could only search for it himself. Who knows, he might find it by chance. At that time, he would be able to regrow his arm and recover his strength. Touching his severed arm, after many years, the wound had already been treated, but Tian Mingzi could still feel the pain. This pain was not the pain of a severed arm, but the pain of his heart. Back then, his severed arm was still vivid in his mind. That kind of pain was still with him, very clear. Thinking of the scene of his severed arm, a cold killing intent appeared on Tian Mingzi's face. His eyes were extremely cold, and his body was filled with a chilling killing intent. Consider yourself lucky to have escaped into the bewildering light ocean, Tian Mingzi said in a low voice. His voice was hoarse and cold, like the roar of a dark underworld beast. The hatred for his severed arm was monstrous. There was also the enmity of his brother's death. However, since the other party had entered the bewildering light ocean, there was no possibility of him leaving. Even if he did not die, he would be lost in the bewildering light ocean, causing him to lose the chance to personally take revenge. Entering the Thousand Origin Cave to search for sacred medicine, it was inevitable that he would find other treasures during this period. There would also be some conflicts with other cultivators. As long as there was a conflict, Tian Mingzi would not be lenient and would kill them all. After losing his arm, his temperament was affected, and he was no longer as calm as before. Moreover, with his strength as an elite 3-star, the majority of people who entered the Thousand Origin Cave were not his match. Jiandi Chunzong, wait until my severed arm is regenerated, and my battle strength is fully recovered. I will kill you and your friends one by one. Tian Mingzi growled. Unfortunately, you won't have the chance. Suddenly, an indifferent voice rang out. It floated over like a gentle breeze, drifting into Tian Mingzi's ears, causing his expression to change greatly. Who? At the same time, an extremely tyrannical power erupted from Tian Mingzi's body, like a dark tide sweeping in all directions. Even with a broken arm, Tian Mingzi was still very strong despite his battle prowess being affected. However, the strength of an expert was often relative. Apart from those supreme experts who stood at the top of the void of the universe, the strength of others was limited. When Chunzong was still in the Saint Realm, Tian Mingzi was already an unparalleled master. But now it was the opposite. Chunzong's combat strength had completely surpassed Tian Mingzi's. In other people's eyes, Tian Mingzi was strong, but in Chunzong's eyes, Tian Mingzi was weak. Tian Mingzi, it's been a few years since we last met. You look a little miserable. Chunzong's figure stepped out from the darkness. His footsteps were soft but rhythmic. Every step seemed to step on Tian Mingzi's heart, causing it to tremble uncontrollably. It was extremely stifling. Tian Mingzi's eyes were dark and gloomy as he stared at the approaching figure. His face was full of vigilance, which then turned into astonishment. Chunzong, Jiandi Chunzong, the person who killed his younger brother Tian Mingzi back then. The person who cooperated with his clone to cut off one of his arms. Didn't you enter the bewildering light ocean? Tian Mingzi couldn't help but exclaim in disbelief. Thanks to you. Chunzong smiled slightly. Indeed, if it weren't for Tian Mingzi, he wouldn't have been chased by so many masters and fell into the hands of the 5 bewildering light saints. In the end, he had to take the risk to enter the bewildering light ocean. At that time, he narrowly escaped death in the bewildering light ocean. The most dangerous time was when he encountered the Blood Killer King. If he hadn't met the Silver Blade King, Zhao Mingkong, he would have fallen into the hands of the Blood Killer King. His life would be worse than death, and he might even be dead now. And the cause of all this was Tian Mingzi. Of course, after suffering, he gained a lot of benefits in the bewildering light ocean. In the end, he gained control of the bewildering light island and obtained the eternal heaven and earth writ, allowing his consciousness to descend into the eternal battle fort. That would be the greatest opportunity. It could be said that the opportunity he obtained in the bewildering light ocean was not inferior to the heart sword seal he obtained when he was young, which allowed him to be reborn. But, so what? Being able to obtain the opportunity depended on his own ability. Revenge still had to be taken. Tianmingzi still had to die. You can actually come out of the bewildering light ocean alive. Tianmingzi's breathing began to become heavy. For a moment, his thoughts took a turn, and he thought of many things. The bewildering light ocean had always been very mysterious in the eyes of cultivators, and it also made people incomparably fearful. Since ancient times, those who entered the bewildering light ocean had never been able to leave. Of course, there were also people who guessed that while the bewildering light ocean was full of danger, there were also many opportunities. If one could leave alive, they might be able to obtain many opportunities. Now, this person had left the bewildering light ocean. Perhaps he had already obtained some great opportunity inside. Kill him. He must kill him and seize the opportunity. For people who had already dug out their own potential to the extreme and could no longer improve their combat strength, great opportunities were very important and full of attraction and temptation. Now, the great opportunity was in front of him, and it was delivered to his door personally. How could he miss it? Moreover, this person had the secret of a clone. However, Tianmingzi would not forget that back then, when this person's original body and clone joined forces, they were able to fight against him and even cut off one of his arms. However, because of the impact of losing one's arm, he had spent most of his wealth to obtain a secret treasure. Attack! In an instant, his thoughts flashed like lightning. Tianmingzi made his move. Chain of darkness! In an instant, a chain that seemed to be made of black fine iron, wrapped in black smoke, and burning like flames, shot out from Tianmingzi's sleeve like a viper. Like a viper coming out of its hole, it was extremely vicious and vicious. In just an instant, the chain of darkness approached Chen Zong and quickly wrapped around Chen Zong's body like a coiling snake, tightly binding him. Chen Zong's eyes flashed with a touch of astonishment. What kind of secret treasure was this? It was very fast, and it gave off a feeling that it was impossible to dodge. In just an instant, he was bound. The black flames burning on the chain exuded a trace of coldness that invaded his body, cutting off his internal strength and affecting the mobilization and operation of his strength. Of course, this was nothing to him. Seeing Chen Zong bound by the chains of darkness, Tianmingzi felt as if a heavy burden had been lifted from his shoulders. The chain of darkness is a one-time use secret treasure. No matter who it is, as long as they are locked on, they cannot escape. Tianmingzi's voice was astonishingly cold, his eyes flashing with crazy killing intent. Now, hand over the secret of your clone and tell me how you can leave the bewildering light sea. Hand over everything you have, and I can give you a quick death. Otherwise, I will let you know the taste of living a life worse than death. A threat. Tianmingzi was threatening Chen Zong. The chain of darkness is indeed a good secret treasure. Chen Zong was not afraid at all, and said neither slowly nor quickly, "Unfortunately, you have chosen the wrong target." The moment his voice fell, an extremely tyrannical power burst out from Chen Zong's body like a torrent, like a volcanic eruption. In just an instant, the chain of darkness that tightly bound Chen Zong tightened and made a sound as if it could not bear the burden. Tianmingzi's expression suddenly changed. In an instant, he burst out with all his strength. His killing intent was like a tide, and he did not hesitate to attack. He was afraid. He was afraid that if Chen Zong broke free from the chain of darkness, the consequences would be terrible. Therefore, he would rather give up the so-called opportunities that he had not obtained yet and kill him. It had to be said that Tianmingzi's choice at the critical moment was correct. If Chen Zong was not strong enough, he would have been killed. However, it was a pity that the barbarian mountain king, a top 7-star expert, had been killed by Chen Zong. With a bang, the chain of darkness broke inch by inch and collapsed in an instant. The dark smoke that burned like flames also collapsed, like a candle flame blown by a strong wind. At the same time, Tianmingzi's most powerful attack was launched directly at Chen Zong without mercy. It was an extremely condensed black palm print, which exuded an extremely terrible fluctuation, suppressing and shattering everything. In the face of this extremely tyrannical attack, Chen Zong, who had broken the chain of darkness, did not change his expression at all. He looked so calm and relaxed. His fingers were like a sword, and with a light stroke, it was like a sharp blade cutting through a thin sheet of paper. In the blink of an eye, under Tian Mingzi's panic-stricken gaze, the palm print that he had gathered all of his strength to unleash was actually torn apart. Like a hot knife through butter. These words flashed in Tian Mingzi's mind. At the same time, a carefree feeling spread, as if he had cut it open himself. Extremely horrifying! His hair stood on end. In the next moment, Tian Mingzi could barely catch a glimpse of sword light piercing through the air. He only felt a slight pain between his eyebrows. Immediately, his vision turned black and he lost consciousness. Without drawing his sword, Tian Mingzi did not need to draw his sword. He only needed to use his fingers as a sword to kill Tian Mingzi. This was the difference brought about by the difference in combat strength. After killing Tian Mingzi, Chen Zong suddenly felt slightly relieved, as if a burden had been lifted off his shoulders. He had been hunted down, escaped into the bewildering light sea, experienced life and death, and obtained an opportunity. The source of all this was Tian Mingzi. Now Tian Mingzi had been killed by his own hand. This feeling of relief was very wonderful, as if it was a kind of sublimation. The 5 bewildering light saints were not dead, but they had been sent into the bewildering light sea. Death was only a matter of time. Moreover, before death, they would experience the dangers of the bewildering light sea and feel despair. The main culprit, Tian Mingzi, had been killed. For a moment, Chen Zong reconsidered whether to deal with the others. Back then, those people had surrounded him like sharks that had smelled blood. They had tried to take him away and interrogate him about the whereabouts of his doppelganger. However, they had not succeeded. From a certain point of view, he didn't suffer any losses, so the revenge was actually dispensable. On the other hand, it was because he had killed Tian Mingzi. The other things were relatively secondary, and they were not essential. Chapter 1776. In the upper primordial realm, no one knew that Chen Zong had come out of the bewildering light sea alive. Those who knew had either been sent into the bewildering light sea by Chen Zong to experience it properly, or had been executed. If people knew about this, it would definitely cause a huge commotion. With the grudge settled, Chen Zong did not continue to stay in the upper primordial realm, but returned to the bewildering light sea. As for Azura's doppelganger, Chen Xiu, of course, returned to the Shura Gate. The Shura Gate had issued an ultimatum, asking those who had broken their oath to come to the Shura Gate to confess within 3 days. Otherwise they would be killed. This ultimatum was, without a doubt, very intimidating. After all, the Blood Claw King had forced them to break their oath and escape. Chen Xiu, who could kill the Blood Claw King, was undoubtedly more powerful. However, after 3 days, there were very few who came to the Shura Gate to confess. That day there were 3 6-star warriors, 7 5-star warriors, and 21 4-star warriors who broke the oath and ran away. However, there were only 2 5-star warriors and 6 4-star warriors who came to confess within the time limit. Was 3 days a short time? In fact, it was not short. It could be reached quickly through the Void Temple in any city. It was just a matter of whether they were willing to come back to confess. It seemed that the others were not willing to come back to confess. Or rather, they thought that once they left, they could leave forever. As long as they kept a low profile and concealed their identities, they would not be chased. After all, the ultimate mystery realm was not small. If that was the case, the ultimatum of the Shura Gate would not be so powerful. In the Shura Gate's main hall, Chen Xiu sat high up. Below him were the half-step great saint experts who came to confess. In the outside world, these people were very powerful, but here they were all submissive and did not dare to make a sound. You have 3 choices. Chen Xiu's lips curled into a cold smile. His voice was as cold as the northern wind, causing everyone to tremble uncontrollably. 1. Go back to where you came from. These people trembled and fear appeared on their faces. Go back to where you came from. Without a doubt, it was back to the bewildering light sea or even the bewildering light sea. They knew very well that those days were simply torture. He could leave now. The outside world was so vast. If he went back, he would definitely go crazy. It was like a person who had fallen into despair suddenly grasped hope, but was about to fall into despair again. It was even more unbearable. The second choice is to all die here. Chen Xiu's words were like the murmurs of a devil, causing everyone's expressions to change drastically, and they were extremely shocked. They didn't hesitate to break their oath and escape. It was because they didn't want to die. Who knew that Chen Xiu's strength would be so terrifying? He didn't want to die before, and he didn't want to die now. There was only one choice left. The few of them felt incomparably nervous and uneasy. The third option is to make a new vow to be loyal to the Azura's Gate for the rest of your life. No matter what kind of crisis the Azura's Gate encounters, you will never flee. Vow to live and die with the Azura's Gate. Otherwise, may the heavens and earth destroy you. Chen Xiu's cold voice carried a hint of arrogance, as if he was the judge of a god. 3 choices. You have 10 breaths of time to consider. Chen Xiu finally said. 10 breaths of time was very short, but to a half-step great sage expert, their thinking speed was incomparably fast. 10 breaths of time was enough for them to consider many things. The few of them were considering. They could see that the person in front of them wasn't joking. He was really asking them to make a choice. 10 breaths of time was up. I choose the third option. Vow to be loyal to the Azura's Gate. I vow to live and die with the Azura's Gate. A 5-star expert immediately said. The others also expressed their opinions, choosing the third option. After all, the first option was to experience despair. The second option was to die immediately. Only the third option could allow them to live. They also thought of more. The Azura's Gate had elite 7-star experts, 6-star experts, and 5-star experts. They had great potential and an extraordinary future. In this place they could continue to live. Even if they encountered any danger, they would have 7-star experts to protect them. No matter what, the third option was the best choice at the moment. Moreover, under normal circumstances, as long as they didn't seek death, the Azura's Gate wouldn't be destroyed so easily. Naturally, they wouldn't die with the Azura's Gate. All in all, this was the best choice for them. Looking at the choices made by everyone, Chen Xiu couldn't help but smile. There would be a day when he would leave. Before he left, of course, he had to leave behind more strength for the Azura's Gate so that it could be passed down. 2 5-star experts and 6 4-star experts would be loyal to the Azura's Gate forever. They would live and die together with the Azura's Gate. They would do their best to serve the Azura's Gate. This would undoubtedly give the Azura's Gate a layer of protection. Perhaps to him, 5-star and 4-star experts were nothing, but they weren't weak at all. In the entire Supreme Mystery world, there weren't many sects and forces that had 4-star experts. In the past, the Heavenly Luo sect only had 1 4-star expert, but they were able to dominate the Heavenly Luo city for countless years. Now, the Azura's Gate's high-end combat strength was countless times more than the Heavenly Luo sect's. With a better cultivation environment, they could recruit more outstanding disciples and continue to improve. You've made the right choice. Chen Xiu smiled slightly. From now on, the 8 of you will be the Azura's Gate protectors, second only to the Supreme Elder. You will live and die in the Azura's Gate. I hope that you can also choose outstanding disciples to teach in the Azura's Gate and pass down what you've learned. These 8 people had broken their oath and were bound by it. In this lifetime, their combat strength couldn't improve at all. Their current combat power was already their limit. However, their current combat strength wasn't weak either. They could protect the Azura's Gate protectors, which complemented each other. In addition, each of them had extraordinary combat strength and rich experience. If they could choose some of them to teach as disciples, it would only be beneficial to the Azura's Gate. Of course, it would also be beneficial to them. After all, if the disciples they taught were outstanding enough, they could gain face and strengthen the Azura's Gate, ensuring the continuation of the Azura's Gate. As for these people who lived and died with the Azura's Gate, they could live longer. Originally, they thought that after swearing the oath, they would be treated like slaves of the Azura's Gate, without any dignity. However, when they heard Chen Xiu's arrangement to become the Azura's Gate protectors, second only to the Supreme Elder, they were surprised and secretly grateful. They were all half-step Great Saint experts. If they were treated like slaves, they would lose all dignity. Living was no better than dying. Now, they finally had a good position in the Azura's Gate. At least, they wouldn't be inferior to the few Supreme Elders of the Azura's Gate. After dealing with these people who came to plead guilty, Chen Xiu looked outside. Next were those who didn't come to plead guilty. They thought that once they left the Azura's Gate, they would have a bright future. Little did they know that they were too naive, too naive. As long as they entered the Bewildering Light Island, they would be protected by the Bewildering Light Island's mark on their body. That mark was impossible to detect. Even the Mountain Sea King couldn't detect the Bewildering Light Island's mark. Only Chen Zong could do it, because Chen Zong was now the master of the Bewildering Light Island, and he controlled the island. However, this time, Chen Zong wouldn't take action. He would stay in the Azura's Gate, and the person who would take action would be his real body. The eternal heaven and earth order needed time to accumulate energy. When it had enough energy, he would be able to send his consciousness to the eternal battle fort again. However, it would take a few months for the eternal heaven and earth order to recover its energy. Naturally, he wouldn't waste these few months. Another reason was the Rakshasa King. Since the Rakshasa King had taken action, although not personally, it meant that he had set his eyes on the Azura's Gate again. Chen Zong estimated that the Rakshasa King's combat strength was at least at the level of an ordinary 8-star. Of course, if it was just an ordinary 8-star, he wouldn't be afraid. If it was an elite 8-star, it would be quite troublesome. Therefore, he needed to further improve his strength. Following the guidance of the Bewildering Light Island's mark, Chen Zong began to move. The Black Spear King was one of the strong people on the Bewildering Light Island. He had the super combat strength of an elite 6-star and swore to guard the Azura's Gate for 100 years. However, he broke the oath and escaped before the Blood Claw King and the Dripping Blood Tower invaded. Now, the Black Spear King was hiding in a large mountain. The mountain was majestic and the terrain was complicated. It was difficult to find traces of people. "I'll hide here for 100 years before going out," the Black Spear King said secretly. Of course, he had received the Azura's ultimatum, but he wouldn't confess because he knew that the consequences of confessing would be terrible. Since he had already left, he would be an idiot if he returned. However, the Black Spear King was also wary of Chen Xiu, who could kill the Blood Claw King. Although he maintained a skeptical attitude, he still went into hiding for the sake of caution. 100 years was nothing to him. If he came out after 100 years and kept a low profile, he wouldn't be discovered by the Azura's Gate. The Black Spear King's plan was very good. If Chen Zong really didn't control the Bewildering Light Island, he wouldn't be able to track the fluctuations of the mark, and the Black Spear King would successfully avoid the Azura's ultimatum. However, there were no ifs. Following the fluctuations of the mark, a figure flashed across the sky like a flash of light and headed toward the mountain. This was the mountain where the Black Spear King was hiding. Soon, Chen Zong arrived at the depths of the mountain and approached the place where the Black Spear King was hiding. The Black Spear King was practicing his spear skills. Although he couldn't improve his combat strength because of breaking the oath, he had been practicing his spear skills since he was young. After countless years, it had become an instinct. Practicing his spear skills was also a kind of pleasure for the Black Spear King. Otherwise, wouldn't it be too boring to hide for 100 years? He would go crazy. The Black Spear King's black spear was extremely tyrannical. Even if he didn't inject any powerful energy into it, his spear skills alone were enough to destroy the surroundings. Every spear move was simple and direct, as if it had returned to its original state. After a while, the Black Spear King stopped practicing and put away his spear. He exhaled a long breath and looked around. He was quite satisfied with his spear skills. Chapter 1777. As the breeze blew, the leaves swayed, and the sunlight shone on the ground, creating a mottled shadow. Everywhere was in ruins, and the crisscrossing gullies left by the spear could be seen. It was a ghastly sight. These were the traces left behind by the Black Spear King when he did not use his powerful combat strength to practice his spear technique. The Black Spear King was very satisfied with this. However, the instant that voice that was like a cool breeze sounded out, the Black Spear King's expression suddenly changed greatly, as if he was facing a great enemy, and he was extremely shocked. Who was it? Who could have approached him without him noticing? If the other party wanted to kill him, wouldn't it be easy for him to succeed? In an instant, many thoughts flashed through the Black Spear King's mind like lightning. His eyes contained an extremely cold light as they instantly shot out. The black spear in his hand suddenly shook, as if a black dragon had rushed out of the abyss, releasing an unparalleled coldness and domineering aura that wanted to destroy everything. As the wind blew past, a figure appeared in front of the Black Spear King, who was dozens of meters away. "It's you." The Black Spear King stared at the newcomer's face, and his expression changed drastically. His pupils shrunk to the size of needles, and he was extremely shocked. Chernzong. It was Chernzong who broke through the Bewildering Light realm and sent them away from Bewildering Light Island. It was him who killed the Blood Claw King. Although the Black Spear King was puzzled as to why the other party was wearing a white robe, then a gray robe, and now a white robe, and there seemed to be a difference in temperament, he did not have the time to think so much. As if he was facing a great enemy, he was extremely terrified. "How did you find me?" The Black Spear King was an elite 6-star existence after all. He had experienced countless battles and was very powerful, so he quickly calmed down. Although he was wary, the Black Spear King did not believe that the other party had the strength to kill the Blood Claw King. Everything was just a rumor. He did not see it with his own eyes, and no one saw it. Perhaps the one who killed the Blood Claw King was someone else. "You don't need to know so much," Chernzong said unhurriedly, not intending to give the other party any explanation. "In that case, you can go to hell." The black spear in the Black Spear King's hand shook, as soon as his voice fell. It seemed as if a black flood dragon was dancing its body. It issued a resounding and sharp cry, and instantly pierced the sky. It turned into a black light with astonishing might and unparalleled fighting strength. The moment he made his move, the Black Spear King did not hold back in the slightest. In the blink of an eye, he had traversed dozens of meters, which was no different from 1 meter. The black spear radiance blossomed in front of his eyes. It was as swift and ferocious as a dark meteor. It was as domineering as a dark thunderbolt, and it carried an extremely terrifying might as it pierced through and shattered everything. The Black Spear King's battle prowess was still terrifying. However, Chernzong's combat strength was even more terrifying. In the face of this spear, Chernzong had no intention of dodging. In the eyes of the Black Spear King, it seemed that he couldn't avoid it and couldn't react in time. The spear carried an extremely terrifying power as it pierced through the sky. In the instant that it arrived, the sunken knight's sword was also unsheathed. It turned into a black sword light, causing the surrounding light to dim. An extremely sharp sound suddenly rang out, and countless sparks splashed in all directions. The Black Spear King found that the spear that he had used all his strength to stab out had been blocked. It was his opponent's sword that had blocked his black spear. The pitch-black sword was held horizontally in front of him, and the blade had accurately blocked the tip of the black spear. It seemed like a coincidence, but the Black Spear King had a feeling that it was not a coincidence, but that his attack had really been blocked. His opponent's eyes were very calm, without the slightest surprise. The Black Spear King suddenly had an indescribable feeling of horror that emerged from the deepest part of his heart. With a low roar, a murderous aura erupted. The black spear shook again, as if it had transformed from a flood dragon into a demonic dragon, erupting with an even more tyrannical power. Black Dragon Spear Technique. Without hesitation, the Black Spear King brought out his strongest move. The black spear in his hand seemed to have turned into a dark demonic dragon that wreaked havoc in the world. Countless dark auras spread out, bearing fangs and brandishing claws in a frenzied manner. The Black Spear King seemed to be holding a dark demonic dragon in his hand as he fiercely blasted at Chen Zong with an extremely terrifying might. His eyes were crazy and violent, and his heart was filled with killing intent. Either you die or I die. Chen Zong did not directly erupt with all his combat power to kill the Black Spear King because the Black Spear King's spear technique was really good, and he could use it to temper himself a little. Therefore, Chen Zong also limited his combat power to the elite 6-star level and fought with his opponent. With a sword in hand, Chen Zong blocked all of his opponent's attack. No matter how tyrannical the Black Spear King's spear technique was, he could not break through Chen Zong's sword circle defense. The unbreakable sword circle reappeared, and it seemed to have become Chen Zong's instinct. The unbreakable sword circle integrated with the Yin-Yang Dao will was enough to withstand many powerful attacks even without the Yin-Yang sword wheel. Unless the attack exceeded Chen Zong's endurance, he would need to use the Yin-Yang sword wheel. Although the Black Spear King's strength was tyrannical, Chen Zong obviously did not need to use the Yin-Yang sword wheel. The unbreakable sword circle was enough to withstand the opponent's spear attack. The Black Spear King used the Black Dragon Spear technique, but he still could not break through Chen Zong's sword circle. This made the Black Spear King more and more anxious. He was afraid, the fear in the deepest part of his heart. Even he himself was not very clear about it. The fear that originated from the depths of his heart was slowly eroding his mind and affecting his calmness. Black Dragon Explosion, Black Dragon Space, Shattering Strike. The Black Spear King roared, and his aura erupted in an instant. It instantly surpassed his own limits and approached the 7-star level. Secret Technique. The Black Spear King used his secret technique and released his most tyrannical attack just to break Chen Zong's sword circle and kill him to prevent future troubles. The Black Spear King seemed to have completely transformed into a dark demonic dragon. He bared his fangs and brandished his claws. His entire body was burning with a terrifying dark demonic fire that burned wantonly and wanted to burn everything. This was a demonic dragon with destructive power that descended in an instant. Chen Zong's eyes suddenly emitted a sharp light that pierced through the void like the edge of a sword. He drew his sword. Heart intent sword style, heartbeat. He did not use any secret technique. He only slashed out with his sword. The speed of the sword was extremely fast. It was like a stream of light that arrived first. This sword was condensed with unparalleled power. It silently tore through the void and directly pierced through the head of the dark demonic dragon. Its astonishing sharpness instantly pierced through the head of the dark demonic dragon. It was like a hot knife through butter. This sword pierced through the head and directly through the body. It carried an unparalleled sharpness as it pierced through the body of the dark demonic dragon and stabbed towards the Black Spear King. There was no way to dodge. Chernzong also used the strength of a 6-star elite. However, the first move of the sword intent art, Heartbeat, was much more profound than the Black Spear King's Black Dragon Space Shattering Strike. They were on two completely different levels. It should be known that in terms of talent, Chernzong was many times better than the Black Spear King. In terms of opportunities, he was countless times better than the Black Spear King. Especially after the trip to the Eternal Battle Fort, Chernzong's understanding of the mysteries of heaven and earth had deepened a lot. This move that he perfected with his own vigorous accumulation was even more profound. There was no way to resist. There was no way to dodge. The Black Spear King's pupils shrunk to the size of needles. In that instant, his consciousness became dazed. He only felt that his consciousness and body seemed to have become heavy. It was impossible for him to dodge the dark sword light. The result of not being able to dodge was that the space between his eyebrows would be pierced. Chernzong did not hold back in the slightest. Although the Black Spear King's battle strength was extraordinary, being at the elite 6-star level, he was extremely powerful. If he could serve the Azura Gate, it would indeed be a great boost to their strength. However, there was no need for that. Not only did this person violate his oath, he also did not go to the Azura Gate to confess his sins. He even planned to kill him. Therefore, he must die. With one sword, the Black Spear King died. His eyes were filled with intense regret and unwillingness. At that time, he did not hesitate to violate his oath in order to escape. He did not expect that he would lose his life because of this. The Black Spear King died with a heart full of unwillingness. The Black Spear was taken away by Chernzong. The Black Spear King's storage ring also became Chernzong's spoils of war. It just so happened that the Black Spear King's Black Dragon Spear art and other cultivation techniques were also in the storage ring. Although they were useless to Chernzong, they could be used to enrich the Azura Gate's collection of cultivation techniques and martial arts. Killing the Black Spear King was not the end. It was just the beginning. Because there were still 2 other 6-star experts and several 5-star and 4-star experts who did not go to the Azura Gate to confess their sins. These people would also have to pay the price. The mark on Bewildering Light Island was still there. It could not be erased unless one died. In this profound world, Chernzong could feel it. The closest one was located in the northwest direction, not too far away. In an instant, Chernzong turned into a gust of wind and blended into the void. His speed was astonishing. In the blink of an eye, he disappeared without a trace. The second person that Chernzong had his eyes on was a 4-star powerhouse. However, at this moment, this 4-star powerhouse had transformed into an ordinary person and was living in a small city. This small city was very ordinary. There were cultivators here, but their overall strength was not high, and there were not many of them. The strongest was only a late Saint Realm Master, and there was not much fighting. It was simply a city suitable for retirement. This 4-star expert chose to live here and conceal his identity because he wanted to live. He broke his oath and escaped from the Azura Gate, but he did not go to the Azura Gate to confess his sins. Here, he disguised himself as an ordinary person with no cultivation. In his opinion, he should be able to live peacefully until many years later when the Azura Gate forgot about him. At that time, he would decide whether to continue living in concealment or take action. Little did he know that he had been targeted by Chernzong. Danger was approaching. Unfortunately, he did not have Chernzong's keen sense of danger. Soon, Chernzong arrived at this small city and stepped directly into it. Following the induction of the mark, Chernzong came to the place where the 4-star expert concealed his identity. It was a very ordinary house. It looked very normal, no different from the surroundings. The other party was leisurely sunbathing in the small courtyard with a look of enjoyment. Sure enough, the sunlight outside was very comfortable. This kind of day without fighting was very comfortable and leisurely. Light footsteps sounded and entered the person's ears. Immediately, he became vigilant. His eyes stared at the door as if he wanted to see through it. Chapter 1778. The door to the small courtyard opened once again, and Chen Zong walked out. His footsteps were neither fast nor slow, and he was calm and unhurried. He gently closed the door and walked out of the city. In a small courtyard behind the gate, a man was lying on a recliner with his eyes closed as if he was sleeping. However, there was an almost undetectable sword wound on his chest, directly piercing through his heart. He had no power to resist at all. This was caused by the difference in combat strength. The second one. Chen Zong crossed off another name from his must-kill list. Then, it was naturally the third one. The highest mystery realm was big, but it was not big either. After all, Chen Zong had the combat strength of a 7-star elite. His flying speed was even faster than a normal 7-star elite and was close to an 8-star. Even if the distance was too far, he could use the void gate of the empty space temple to teleport quickly. Although he had to pay a price, it was nothing to Chen Zong. The third target, a 5-star elite, was killed. The fourth target knelt on the ground and begged for mercy, but Chen Zong still killed him without hesitation. Breaking the oath and running away was the first crime. Not taking the initiative to go to the Shura Gate after learning of the Shura Gate's ultimatum was the second crime. Under the second crime, there was no reason to spare the other party. In this world, once something was done, there was no room for regret. The fifth, the sixth, the seventh, one after another, those who broke the oath and did not take the initiative to go to the Shura Gate were killed by Chen Zong. Their storage rings were naturally taken by Chen Zong as spoils of war to enrich the Shura Gate's treasury. As for Chen Xiu's clone, he entered the Shura secret realm again. Now, Chen Xiu had stepped into the 9th ring and was only 1 ring away from the center. However, he did not know what the center of the Shura secret realm was like. In this world, there was no secret that could not be leaked. There was no wall that did not have a crack. While Chen Zong was hunting down the people who had broken the oath, the other people who had broken the oath gradually found out bits and pieces of news. Even though they had no idea how the other party managed to find them, they were still terrified. At that time, they broke the oath because they were afraid of the Blood Claw King. Now they had to pay another heavy price. No one wanted to die. No one wanted to die. The Golden Light King and the Red Goblin King met. Both of them had 6-star combat strength, but they were only ordinary 6-star. The place where the two of them met was in the guest room of an ordinary restaurant in a city. The Golden Light King was a middle-aged man in a pale golden robe. He had a slender body and an ordinary appearance, but his eyes were sharp. When he turned, they were as sharp as knives and swords, flashing with a little bit of sharpness. The Red Goblin King was a beautiful middle-aged woman dressed in a black and red close-fitting robe. She even had a black mole at the corner of her mouth. At this moment, the two of them had grave expressions. This was because they had already received news of the Black Spear King's death. Although Chen Zong's operation was very efficient, it still took time. Sometimes, the speed of information was faster than the flying speed of people. Not only was the Black Spear King killed, but the others were also killed one after another. The Golden Light King's face was extremely solemn, faintly pale. The Black Spear King's battle prowess was much higher than theirs. Even if the two of them joined forces, they were still no match for the Black Spear King. However, since the Black Spear King was killed, it meant that the two of them would not be able to escape death. But they didn't want to die. What should they do? Let's join a top force. The Red Goblin King said sternly, her eyes resolute. With our battle prowess, no force will refuse us to join. Which force do you think we should join? The Golden Light King didn't have any ideas at the moment, so he could only ask. Taishan Holy Palace. The Red Goblin King's eyes flashed as she said each word decisively. Taishan Holy Palace was the most powerful sect in the Taishan world. It was fully deserving of being the overlord of the Taishan world. It was extremely overbearing and had at least one Supreme Saint Ultimate Expert in charge. Even though Supreme Saint Ultimate Experts did not usually appear in Taishan Holy Palace, there were many experts who were half a step away from Supreme Saint Realm. In fact, the terrifying expert who was ranked first on the Taishan Supreme Saint Board, who had 9-star battle prowess, was from Taishan Holy Palace. There were also 2 experts with 8-star battle prowess in Taishan Holy Palace, at least on the surface. As for the other 2 experts with 8-star battle prowess on the Taishan Supreme Saint Board, they belonged to the other 2 top forces, second only to Taishan Holy Palace. Although there were many half-step great saints in the Great Profound Sacred Palace, the 2 of them had 6-star combat strength. Even if they were placed in the Great Profound Sacred Palace, they could still be considered experts. If they wanted to rely on the Great Profound Sacred Palace, the Great Profound Sacred Palace would not reject them. After making the decision, the 2 immediately acted and quickly headed for Taishan Mountain, where Taishan Holy Palace was located. Taishan Mountain was the tallest and largest mountain in the Taishan world. It was almost 10,000 meters tall and was very majestic. It towered over the earth and seemed to reach into the sky. Endless clouds covered it, mysterious and profound. After the Golden Light King and the Red Goblin King arrived quickly, they handed over their visiting cards and waited for arrangements. After all, the 2 of them were 6-star experts who were half a step away from Supreme Saint Realm. Soon, someone came to receive them. One name after another flashed through Chernzong's mind. Regardless of whether they were hiding, kneeling and begging for mercy after being found, hysterical, or fighting back with all their might, none of them could escape death. In the end, only 2 people were left: the Golden Light King and the Red Goblin King. In the perception of the mark, the 2 of them seemed to be very close. Could it be that they were in the same place? Just as well. Let's get rid of them altogether. Chernzong smiled slightly and once again set off for the nearest and largest city, teleporting through the Void Gate of the Void Temple. The Void Temple was all over the Tianyuan Sacred Realm, but some small cities did not have branches. Only the larger cities had branches. After all, it cost a lot to build the Void Gate. As for where the headquarters of the Void Temple was located, very few people knew. All in all, the Void Temple had always been a neutral existence. Soon, Chernzong appeared in Taishan City. Taishan City was the largest city in the territory of Taishan Mountain. It was also the largest, strongest, and most famous city in the Taishan world. Here, one could buy treasures that could not be found anywhere else. Here, one could also meet many famous cultivators. All in all, Taishan City was equivalent to the most prosperous gathering place in the Taishan world. Countless cultivators, countless resources, and countless treasures gathered and passed through here. Chernzong did not stop. He immediately left the city and flew in the direction of the fluctuations of the mark. Soon, a huge mountain appeared in front of his eyes. Taishan Mountain was nearly 10,000 meters high and was the highest mountain in the Taishan world. It was also where the Taishan Holy Palace was located. And the Taishan Holy Palace was the overlord of the Taishan world. Even in the entire Tianyuan Sacred Realm, it could be called the overlord. The strongest force. Those 2 people, the Golden Light King and the Red Goblin King, were in Taishan Mountain. Had they hidden in Taishan Mountain, or had they become members of the Taishan Holy Palace? Perhaps it was the latter. Chernzong's brows furrowed slightly as he stared intently. For a moment, he did not immediately enter Taishan Mountain because Chernzong was thinking about many things. If the Golden Light King and the Red Goblin King joined the Taishan Holy Palace, they would be protected by the Taishan Holy Palace. Then, if he insisted on killing the 2 of them, he would become an enemy of the Taishan Holy Palace. Chernzong knew very well that such a powerful force valued its reputation very much. Even if they did not care about the deaths of the Golden Light King and the Red Goblin King, they would think that it was a blow to the reputation of the Taishan Holy Palace. They would not allow it, and they would definitely retaliate. On the surface, the Taishan Holy Palace has an ordinary 9-star cultivator, an elite 8-star cultivator, and an ordinary 8-star cultivator, Chernzong thought to himself. On the surface it was so, but what about in the dark? A force as powerful as the Taishan Holy Palace must be hiding something, so how much power was it hiding? If he used all his strength, he should be able to fight an ordinary 8-star cultivator. As for an elite 8-star cultivator, he should be able to survive. But if it was a 9-star cultivator, then he was no match for him. Moreover, provoking a force as powerful as the Taishan Holy Palace was not good for the Shura clan. Should he just give up? No, he absolutely could not allow it. The Golden Light King and the Red Goblin King must pay the price. Perhaps he could wait until his combat ability was further improved, and then come again. However, he had made up his mind to kill those who had broken the oath. There was no reason to give up halfway. Try peaceful means before resorting to force. With this thought, Chernzong made a decision. He sent an invitation, stating his intentions. Of course, Chernzong would not step into Taishan Mountain alone now. That would be disadvantageous to him. In the invitation, Chernzong wrote that the Golden Light King and the Red Goblin King were traitors of the Shura clan. Accepting them would damage the reputation of the Taishan Holy Palace, and so on. He hoped that the Taishan Holy Palace would expel them. As long as the Taishan Holy Palace expelled them, he could take the opportunity to kill them. After all, a powerful force like the Taishan Holy Palace valued its reputation very much. Accepting traitors of other sects was not something to be proud of. If word got out, it would have some impact. Of course, such impact could be eliminated. The key was the benefits. When the benefits were enough, anything was possible. But no matter what, he had to give it a try. At least in terms of reason, he had the upper hand. It was normal to send an invitation, explain the reason, and pursue the traitors. No matter where it was or what era it was the right thing to do. In the Taishan Holy Palace, the sky deity of the Taishan Holy Palace was in the highest position. Below him stood the Golden Light King and the Red Goblin King. Why did you two betray the Shura clan? The Taishan saint asked condescendingly. His tone was indifferent and lofty. The Golden Light King and the Red Goblin King wanted to hide it, but they knew very well that they could not hide anything in front of the Taishan Holy Palace. If they wanted to investigate, it would be easy to find out. In fact, the Taishan Holy Palace already knew everything, but they did not say it out loud. Instead, they wanted the two of them to say it themselves. In desperation, the Golden Light King could only bite the bullet and say the reason. Cowardly. Breaking the oath. No matter where they were, they would be despised. After saying that, the two of them lowered their heads and did not dare to say anything more. They were cultivators with 6-star combat ability, but in front of a young junior, they could only be so submissive. First, the person in front of them was the saint of the Taishan Holy Palace. Chapter 1779. Inside the palace, the atmosphere was cold, solemn, and oppressive, making it difficult to breathe. A coward who goes against his oath. My supreme profound holy palace is upright and upright. We cannot tolerate such filth. The Taishan saint's son stared at the Golden Light King and the Red Goblin King coldly. His words were cold and merciless. The Golden Light King and the Red Goblin King's expressions changed drastically. No matter what, they were still 6-star warriors, and they had their own dignity. Being scolded by a junior like this, they felt ashamed and angry. However, they did not dare to act out. Otherwise, it was very likely that they would be killed here. This was the great profound sacred palace. In their eyes, it was a colossus that they could not resist at all. However, I always think that everyone has their own value. The Taishan saint suddenly changed the topic and looked at the two meaningfully. The Golden Light King and the Red Goblin King were not stupid. They immediately understood what the great abstruse saint's son meant. I, the Golden Light King, swear to be loyal to the Taishan Holy Son and never betray him. The Golden Light King immediately knelt on one knee and swore loudly, "If I go back on my word, may the heavens and earth destroy me." Vaguely, there seemed to be the sound of thunder. Seeing how the Golden Light King was acting, the Red Goblin King followed suit and made an oath. This oath wasn't the same as the one he made in the Azura Gate. If he were to violate it, he would be punished by the heavens and the earth. Of course, swearing in the Azura Gate was different from swearing in the Supreme Profound Holy Palace. After all, the Supreme Profound Holy Palace was many times stronger than the Azura Gate. If they went against the oath of the Shura Gate, they could still escape and seek the protection of the Supreme Profound Holy Palace. But if they went against the oath of the Supreme Profound Holy Palace, where could they run to? What kind of power could he seek protection from? No. Hearing their vows, the great mystic saints stared at them coldly and did not respond. This attitude immediately made the Golden Light King and the Red Goblin King uneasy. Then, a smile appeared on the great abstruse saint's cold face. Very good. In this way, he would have 2 more half-step great saint experts under his command. Moreover, their combat strength would reach the level of an ordinary 6-star expert. The battle prowess of a half-step great sage was divided into 9 stars. However, it was not easy to reach 7 stars, 8 stars were even rarer, and 9 stars were extremely rare. Among them, a 6-star was already considered a very powerful level. He could definitely get a good ranking on the Taishan Supreme Saint Board. The significance of having 2 more 6-star battle masters working for him, and being completely loyal to him, was different from the half-step great sage of the great profound holy palace. At the end of the day, the Golden Light King and the Red Goblin King seemed to have become his servants or even slaves. The people of the Shura clan have already chased us to the outskirts of Taishan Mountain, and they have even sent us a letter of greeting. The Taishan saints stared at the two of them and said slowly, but this made their expressions change drastically. "I'm curious. Where did you come from?" The Taishan saint's son changed the topic and narrowed his eyes. He had done his research and found out that some time ago, the Shura Gate had suddenly gained many half-step great sage expert. The weakest of them was a 4-star expert, while the strongest was a 6-star expert. These people seemed to have appeared out of thin air. There was no information about them at all. After all, some of these people were not from the highest profundity realm, but from other realms. Even the people of the highest profundity realm had disappeared for many years after entering the bewildering light ocean. They had long been forgotten. Saint's son, it's not that we don't want to say, but we have made an oath to the heavenly path that we cannot say, the Golden Light King replied bitterly. When they left Bewildering Light Island, they had made 2 oaths. One was to guard the Shura Gate for 100 years, which was a lighter oath. The other was to not reveal any information about Bewildering Light Island, which was a very heavy oath. Once broken, they would be destroyed by the heavens and the earth. Bewildering Light Island was very important, and Chern Zong naturally did not want others to know about it. Therefore, anyone who left Bewildering Light Island had to make an oath to the heavenly path. Otherwise, once it was leaked, it would bring him even more trouble. Chern Zong was not afraid of trouble, but there were some troubles that did not need to involve himself. The Taishan Saint Sun's eyes suddenly flashed with wisps of light as he pondered. He felt that there must be some big secret behind this. In Chern Zong's invitation, he did not mention his own name. He had sent it in the name of the Shura Gate. Therefore, the Taishan Saint's son did not know that Chern Zong had come. Otherwise, he would not be sitting here so calmly. While thinking, the Taishan Saint Sun had already made a decision. The two of you come with me. The Taishan Saint Sun immediately got up and left Taishan Mountain with the Golden Light King, the Red Goblin King, and another elite 7-star cultivator who had been arranged by the Taishan Holy Palace to protect him. After Chunzong sent out the invitation, he went to Taishan City to wait for news. Taishan City was controlled by the people of the Taishan Holy Palace of Taishan Mountain. Most of the benefits in it belonged to the Taishan Holy Palace. The city lord of Taishan City was also a disciple of the Taishan Holy Palace. Chunzong temporarily stayed in a restaurant in Taishan City and cultivated quietly. The person from the city lord's office entered the restaurant directly and knocked on the door of Chunzong's room. He said very directly, "Sir, the city lord invites you in." This person was dressed in armor, and his aura was cold and solemn. He was a cultivator of the 9th level of the Saint Rudiment realm, and his strength was not ordinary. Chunzong got up and followed him to the city lord's office. The city lord's office was very large, but there were already some people in the main hall. When Chunzong stepped into the main hall, all eyes were fixed on him. When the Golden Light King and the Red Goblin King saw Chunzong, their expressions suddenly changed, and there was a faint sense of fear and uneasiness. This was because they already knew that the others who had broken the oath like them had been killed by the other party. They were the only ones left. However, now that they had sworn to be loyal to the Taishan Saint Sun, they should be protected by the Taishan Saint Sun. Moreover, this was the city lord's office, and there was an elite 7-star cultivator of the Taishan Holy Palace. He did not seem to be a cultivator on the Taishan Supreme Saint ranking, but the aura that leaked out of him was very powerful and shocking. Their lives were guaranteed. Thinking of this, the two of them secretly heaved a sigh of relief. Seeing that Chunzong had entered, the Taishan Holy Sun straightened his body. His pupils constricted in an instant, emitting a terrifying light. A powerful aura, vast and overbearing majesty, suddenly burst forth like an invisible storm sweeping past. Obviously, he recognized Chunzong at a glance, even though he had not seen Chunzong for many years. "So, it's you," the Taishan Saint Sun said word by word, and a trace of excitement and killing intent gradually spread out from the depths of his heart. The Taishan Saint Sun remembered very clearly that when he had first met this person had not been his opponent at all, but had made him suffer a small loss. The second time, this person had actually been able to compete with him. The third time, which was at the king-naming pagoda, this person had actually suppressed him and obtained the first place on the 9-colored king-naming tablet. This was unprecedented. Since then, the Taishan Saint Sun had worked harder and more desperately to improve himself. With his superb talent and the resources of the Taishan Holy Palace, his cultivation and strength had also improved by leaps and bounds. Now he had stepped into the half-step Supreme Saint realm, and his battle strength had soared. The Taishan Saint Sun had thought many times that he must find Chunzong and kill him with his own hands. After all, this person had left an undetectable shadow in his heart over and over again, and it had to be removed. Otherwise, it would affect his ascension to the Supreme Saint realm. That's right, the Taishan Saint Sun's ambition was extremely great. He was sure that he could become an ultimate expert of the Supreme Saint realm, and on this path, he could not tolerate any obstacles. But now, Chunzong had become an obstacle. Originally, he had planned to leave and go to the Xianyuan world to find Chunzong. Crossing the bewildering light sea was not too difficult for the Taishan Holy Palace. He did not expect that Chunzong would appear in front of him. In addition to the Golden Light King, the Red Goblin King, and the Taishan Saint Sun, there were two other people who were also staring at Chunzong. One was the city lord of Taishan City, and the other was the Taishan Saint Sun's guard. The city lord of Taishan City was also a half-step supreme saint. His battle strength had reached the elite 5-star level. Otherwise, he would not have enough deterrence to guard Taishan City. In other words, in the main hall of the city lord's office, there were 5 half-step supreme saints with astonishing battle strength. It was like a dragon's gate and a tiger's den. But Chernzong was not afraid at all. His expression was calm as he walked in unhurriedly. Taishan Saint's son, long time no see. How much have you improved? Chernzong spoke first with a smile, as if he was greeting an acquaintance. Before this, the Taishan Saint's son was indeed a formidable opponent. It could be said that he was a formidable opponent of his life. But after his consciousness entered the eternal battle fort, Chernzong had seen even more peerless geniuses. The Taishan Saint's son might also be called a peerless genius. Compared to some of the geniuses in the eternal battle fort, he was not inferior. But compared to those top geniuses, there was still a gap. At least, from what he had seen before. Of course, it could not be ruled out that the current Taishan Saint's son had greatly improved. But no matter what, Chernzong would not treat the Taishan Saint's son as a formidable opponent as he had been in the past. At best, he could only be regarded as a whetstone. That was all. In just an instant, the Taishan Saint's son felt the change in Chernzong. You are a Jiendi, but you don't dare to sign your name on the invitation. What are you afraid of? The Taishan Saint's son said with a cold smile. He instantly counterattacked. The 2 words, Jiendi, surprised everyone. Since the Taishan Saint's son has already seen my invitation, you should know my purpose. So, what do you plan to do? Chernzong smiled nonchalantly. His gaze swept past the Golden Light King and the Red Goblin King and landed on the Taishan Saint's son's face. Do you plan to protect them? The 2 of them have already pledged their loyalty to me, the Taishan Saint's son said seriously. Sometimes there are some troubles that cannot be provoked. Chernzong's meaning was very obvious. Trouble. The Taishan Saint's son smiled coldly. What can be called trouble in front of me? His words were very domineering. After all, the Taishan Saint Palace was the most powerful force in the Tianyuan sacred territory, and the Taishan Saint's son was the top genius of the Taishan Saint Palace. No one could compare to him. In the future, he would inherit the honor of the palace master of the Taishan Saint Palace. In short, in this world, who would dare to go against the Taishan Saint Palace? Chapter 1780. Although there weren't many people in the main hall of the city lord's mansion, there were hidden sharpness. Wisps of invisible aura filled the air like invisible sharp blades, causing goosebumps to rise on one's skin and hair to stand on end. Although Chernzong and the Taishan Saint hadn't made a move yet, their words carried the intent of swords and sabers. The Taishan Saint, in particular, seemed to want to gain the home advantage and suppress Chernzong bit by bit. If this had been in the past, Chernzong might have treated the Taishan Saint as a formidable enemy and taken him seriously. Unfortunately, after what had happened in the Eternal Battle Fort, the Taishan Saint was nothing. Of course, Chernzong wouldn't underestimate the Taishan Saint either. After all, the Taishan Saint was extremely talented and had the Taishan Sacred Palace to rely on. In terms of cultivation environment and resources, the Taishan Saint couldn't compare. Chernzong's calmness stemmed from a change in his mentality. It was as if he had once seen a tall mountain and had set it as his goal to climb. Before he reached the peak, he coincidentally saw a group of other mountains. None of them were lower than the tall mountain, and some were even taller. The scenery was even more beautiful and magnificent. Naturally, he would not consider climbing the tall mountain as his goal. At best, it would only be a small goal. When one's mentality was different, one would naturally feel different when facing something. As if facing a formidable enemy or as calm as the wind and clouds. Now, Chunzong was facing the Taishan saint. This made the Taishan saint feel very uncomfortable. He didn't know why, but he just felt uncomfortable, as if he was being looked down upon. Chunzong, do you dare fight with me? The Taishan saint asked. His tone was full of anger. He wanted to defeat or even kill Chunzong personally to eliminate the shadow in his heart. Right here. The Chunzong wasn't surprised. In fact, deep down, he also wanted to defeat the Taishan Xingzi. No matter what, the Taishan saint had extraordinary talent and strength. He was indeed qualified to be his opponent. Why? The great Jiandi doesn't dare? The Taishan saint said to provoke Chunzong. As the host, as the guest, Chunzong replied nonchalantly. His tone was calm and unhurried. Whether it was here or elsewhere, it was a battle. When the heart has something to rely on, when the faith is unparalleled, there is nothing to fear. However, if I win, I'll deal with these two. Chunzong glanced at the Golden Light King and the Red Goblin King and added. His goal was to kill the traitors. Golden Light and Red Goblin had broken the oath. Now that the other traitors had been executed, these two people's state shuras would be no exception. Hearing that, the Golden Light King and the Red Goblin King's expressions changed drastically. They hurriedly looked at the Taishan saint's son, not knowing what he meant. However, the Taishan saint's son ignored the Golden Light King and the Red Goblin King. Although the two of them had 6-star combat strength and had sworn loyalty to him, compared to defeating Chunzong, the two of them were clearly not enough. Seeing the great abstruse saint's expression, the Golden Light King and the Red Goblin King's faces darkened. They had a bad feeling. If you lose, I will take your life. The Taishan saint's son's eyes suddenly shot out extremely sharp and cold light. His murderous intent was shocking, as if he wanted to pierce through Chunzong. Let's see if you have the ability. Chunzong smiled. Very good. The Taishan saint nodded slightly. Cold light flashed in his eyes as he looked at the city lord. Get ready for battle. Right away, the city lord immediately stood up and said respectfully. Although he was the city lord and a half-step great saint expert, compared to the Taishan saint's son, the difference in status was huge. He had to be respectful. After all, the Taishan saint's son was equivalent to the future palace lord of the Taishan saint palace. Soon, the preparation of the battle site was completed. The battle site was located inside the city lord's office. It was the place where the city lord usually cultivated. It was very sturdy and could withstand the damage of a half-step great saint. As the city lord of Taishan City, he had the power and financial resources to obtain such materials. The ground and walls were paved with heavy black iron and were very wide. Chunzong and the Taishan saint's son walked in, while the others stayed outside to watch the battle. Jiandi Chunzong, draw your sword. Let me see how much you've improved over the years. The Taishan saint's son chuckled. The anger in his voice grew stronger and stronger, as if it was about to burst out. That was the heat in his heart, the excitement of finally defeating a strong opponent. Yes, he had never met an opponent like Chunzong since he started cultivating. Even the ancient Zhen saint and the Tianlin saint's son could not compare to him at all. Only this Chunzong, who was like an ant at the beginning, grew up quickly and brought great pressure to him. He also forced him to work harder and put in more effort and energy to grow faster and higher. Only then did he have the strength and status he had today. Now was the time to get rid of them. The boiling murderous intent gradually grew, spreading from the deepest part of his heart to his whole body. It was like an electric current flowing through his body, making the Taishan saint's son tremble slightly. It was not fear, but excitement. The excitement of eliminating a strong opponent. As long as he eliminated this person, no one in the same generation in the entire Tianyuan sacred realm could compete with him. He would be invincible. Even many of the older generation would be surpassed and suppressed by him. The Taishan Saint's son even felt that as long as he suppressed this person in front of him, his state of mind would usher in another exchange and sublimate again. At that time, his combat ability would also be affected and increase again. Since when did this person become so important to him? You will soon know how much I have improved. Chen Zong smiled calmly. But you, the Taishan Saint's son, if you are defeated by my sword, it will not be a good thing. You? The Taishan Saint's son sneered. As soon as he finished speaking, he directly attacked. He pointed out a finger, and an extremely powerful force gathered on his finger. It went straight to the tip of his finger and turned into a pale light. It was like a pale aurora that instantly pierced through the void. The pale aurora was extremely powerful. It pierced through the sky and crossed hundreds of meters. Only then did an extremely sharp sound break through the air. It was extremely violent and raged in all directions. However, Chen Zong's expression did not change. He did not even have any intention of dodging. He just pointed his finger like a sword and directly shattered the aurora that shot towards him. This was just a test move. But even so, its power was extremely shocking. A 5-star battle ability could not withstand it at all. In other words, the power of that finger had reached the 6-star level. How many years had it been? The Taishan Saint's son, who used to be in the Saint realm, now had at least a 6-star battle ability. Who knew what kind of shock it would cause if it was spread out? However, Chen Zong was not surprised. The Taishan Saint's son's cultivation was originally one realm higher than his own. Moreover, he was very talented. With the cultivation of a powerful force like the Taishan Saint Palace, his progress must be amazing. With talent and resources, and with enough effort, he could indeed improve rapidly. For example, he had his own opportunities and was able to improve to such a level in a short time. The Taishan Saint's son would naturally be able to do the same. After all, the Eternal Battle Fort was indeed a great opportunity. However, his current level was too low. The benefits he gained from it were actually not much. It could only be considered as superficial. Only when he really broke through the half-step Great Saint Realm and reached the imminent God Realm and went to the Eternal Battle Fort with his real body, he might be able to obtain greater opportunities and benefit. He felt that the Taishan Saint's son's battle ability should not be at the 6-star level. If he reached the 7-star level, he would be able to compete with him. The probing finger attack was defeated by Chen Zong. This was within his expectations. The Taishan Saint's son's expression did not change as he attacked again. Pale white aurora finger attacks continuously shot out from his 10 fingers. Each finger attack was not only fast but also extremely sharp. It could penetrate everything and was indestructible. In the blink of an eye, dozens of pale white finger attacks pierced through the air and shot at Chen Zong dozens of times. They were like stars in the sky, completely sealing him. Moreover, the power of each finger attack was amazing. They were all at the elite 6-star level. Such power also made the Golden Light King and the Red Goblin King, who were watching the battle from outside, change their expressions. They did not expect that after staying in the bewildering light sea for hundreds of years, they would encounter such a monster as soon as they came out. There was no comparison at all. However, the stronger the Taishan Saint's son was, the more relieved they were. At least, they could survive. The Taishan Saint's son did not seem to care about their dignity. However, the dignity of those who went against their oaths to survive had already been trampled under their feet. Facing the Taishan Saint's son's attack, Chen Zong did not explode with the combat strength of a 7-star level. He also suppressed it to the elite 6-star level. The deep night sword was unsheathed. The pitch-black sword light suddenly lit up, and a sword cut across the sky. It was just a simple sword, but it had the feeling that it could block everything in front of it. It was like an iron chain blocking the river. The dozens of pale white aurora finger forces were all blocked by the sword. The power carried by the sword was extremely strong and sharp. It defeated the finger forces one after another. Chen Zong's feet did not move half a step, and his body did not sway in the slightest. After blocking the finger attacks with one sword, Chen Zong's body shook slightly. It was as if he was gliding on water. He was extremely fast. The deep night sword pierced through the air and shot towards the Taishan Saint's sun like a dark meteor. The Taishan Saint's sun's expression was solemn. The sword light kept blooming and enlarging in front of him. It was as if night had fallen, and a cold star was burning, penetrating everything. The sword of the elite 6-star level made the Taishan Saint's sun feel like he could not dodge or resist it. It was as if everything would be pierced by the sharpness of this sword. There was no way to resist it. This was an extremely powerful sword. It was an extremely terrifying sword that had reached the peak of the 6-star level. When the Golden Light King and the Red Goblin King saw this sword, their expressions suddenly changed. They finally understood how the Black Spear King died. Chapter 1781. I uploaded the wrong chapter. I'll fix it immediately. I'm so sorry. The martial arts field in the City Lord's mansion was huge and sturdy. Even with the City Lord's 5-star battle prowess, it was difficult to damage it. However, it was difficult to defend against the power of a 6-star elite. Chen Zong and the Taishan Saint fought fiercely. Ripples spread out in all directions, instantly scraping the extremely sturdy black heavy iron layer by layer. Cracks appeared on it, and countless iron fragments were blown in all directions by the wind. They were like rolling dust. The Taishan Saint's sun unsheathed his long saber. The saber radiance was majestic and overbearing. Every saber strike was extremely vigorous. The saber radiance was like an ancient saber mountain moving horizontally from all directions. This attack was extremely shocking. The power of every saber strike was extremely strong. Even the Black Spear King's strength could not compare. This battle prowess had reached the peak of the 6-star level. The battle prowess Chen Zong displayed with his sword technique was also at the peak of the 6-star level. Fight. The fierce battle continued. This was the third time he had fought with the Taishan Saint. Strictly speaking, the battle in the King Naming Tower did not count. The first time, he was not the Taishan Saint's match at all. The second time, he could barely hold on. Now it was the third time. With a sword in hand, the sword circle was not broken. He completely blocked the Taishan Saint's saber technique. The elite 7-star elite who was responsible for protecting the Taishan Saint was carefully cultivated by the Taishan Saint Palace. He usually did not show any abilities, so he was not listed on the Taishan Supreme Saint list. However, his battle prowess was very strong. At this moment, the elite 7-star elite stared with his hands behind his back. He frowned slightly. He had expected the Taishan Saint Sun to have such strength, but he had not expected the Saint Sun's opponent to have such battle prowess. Jiandi, was this the peerless genius who suppressed the Saint in the King Naming Tower? However, the Saint's ability was not limited to this. The Taishan Saint Sun had a saber in his hand. His saber technique was exquisite, and the power of each saber was unparalleled. However, he still could not break through Chen Zong's defense. In a split second, the saber light changed from being overbearing and violent to surging like the waves of a river. It surged unceasingly, and then turned into flowing water. The waves of the river and the gurgling water alternated, sometimes fast and sometimes slow, sometimes extremely fierce, sometimes soft and flexible, the force alternating constantly. That saber was incomparably sharp, and it seemed as if it could cut through everything in the world. It was terrifying to the extreme. From time to time, the saber light would be large and powerful, and from time to time, it would be as nimble as an embroidery needle. Chen Zong was indeed under a lot of pressure from this kind of bladesmanship. Chen Zong could not help but compare it to the invincible Saber King. He immediately realized that it was not as good as the invincible Saber King. The invincible Saber King's saber technique did not have many variations. It only had a kind of desperate killing intent that pressed forward courageously. His own swordsmanship had been honed time and time again, and it had long been raised to a higher level. It was not inferior to the invincible Saber King's, so naturally, it would not be inferior to the Taishan Saints. Every saber was blocked with extreme precision. Immediately, Chen Zong struck with his sword to counterattack. The sword slashed out calmly, but it gave the Taishan Saint a feeling that he could not dodge it. He hurriedly struck with his saber to meet the attack. The saber light overlapped, and the saber shadows crisscrossed, making it difficult to tell if it was real or fake. It was even harder to defend. However, this kind of saber technique was nothing in Chen Zong's eyes. He could tell if it was real or fake at a glance. The slash of the sword turned slightly and changed to an upward flick. Instantly, it lifted the saber with incomparable precision. Then, the sword light fell, and it was like a white crane nodding its head and pecking lightly. This point contained unparalleled ingenuity, and it revealed the mystery of Chen Zong's swordsmanship. It was just a light touch, and it was only a few inches away, but it burst forth with unparalleled power, as if it could shatter everything. The Taishan Saint immediately felt his hair stand on end. He only felt that this point had blocked all his escape routes, and there was nowhere to hide. This point seemed to explain all the mysteries, and he was horrified. Since he could not dodge, he could only take it head-on. The saber slashed horizontally, but the Taishan Saint felt that it seemed to be a bit slow, and his strength was not enough. It was like water from afar could not put out a nearby fire. Return to Taishan. Defend. He shouted in a low voice like muffled thunder and instantly exploded. In an instant, a white halo burst forth from the Taishan Saint's body, spreading out like a ring of stars. Its speed was extremely shocking, even faster than Chen Zong's sword. The white halo gathered in between the Taishan Saint's eyebrows, turning into a white prism. It was incomparably exquisite and lifelike, like a small, exquisite shield. The sword slashed down, but it was blocked by the small white prism shield. However, the sword was very powerful. After a slight pause, many cracks appeared on the shield. However, this block had bought enough time for the Taishan Saint. Without retreating or dodging, the saber instantly slashed horizontally. The pale white force was highly condensed, spreading out layers of halos, as if a white virtual fire was burning. The saber slashed horizontally. It was extremely forceful, like a saber mountain moving horizontally, but it was also extremely sharp, tearing everything apart. This aura was powerful and vast, as if the mountains were collapsing and the earth was cracking. The most powerful strike. Return to Taishan. Return to Taishan was the secret technique of the Taishan Saint Palace that the Taishan Saint had cultivated after becoming a half-step great saint. It was a profound martial technique of the half-step great saint level that was left behind by the strongest great saint of the Taishan Saint Palace. It was extremely profound and covered a wide range of areas. This strike seemed to be able to split the heavens and the earth. Chen Zong was slightly stunned, and his hair stood on end. It seemed that this strike could split him in half. However, Chen Zong was not afraid. Instead, he felt excited. He was not afraid of the opponent's strength. He was only worried that the opponent was too weak and too boring. No matter what, the great mystic sage had been a formidable opponent in the past. It would be too disappointing if the great mystic sage wasn't strong enough. Facing this strike, Chen Zong had no intention of dodging at all. Yin-yang sword wheel. Black and white, the sword wheel split into two and circled around him. It seemed to seal the void and form a world of its own. That strike gathered all the power, and it seemed to cut off the connection between the heavens and the earth. The moment it hit the yin-yang sword wheel, Chernzong's expression changed slightly. In his perception, that strike was very powerful. However, when he really touched it, he realized that the strike was not only powerful, but it also contained a unique power that could cut off everything between the heavens and the earth. Fortunately, his yin-yang sword wheel was powerful and resisted it directly. As it spun, it constantly diverted the power of the opponent's strike and counterattack. The Taishan Saint Sun's expression changed. He immediately felt the terrifying counterattack and reacted very quickly. Return to Taishan. Speed. In an instant, a pale halo spread out from under his feet. As it spread out, it was like ripples. The halo also spread rapidly from the bottom of his feet and went straight up like a gust of wind. In the blink of an eye, the Taishan Saint Sun's speed was increased to the extreme. He was extremely fast and directly retreated, avoiding Chernzong's counterattack. While Chernzong was surprised, he did not slow down at all. His right foot landed, and an unparalleled power erupted like a volcano. It shook the ground, and countless cracks spread out in all directions. The powerful counterattack made Chernzong turn into a bolt of lightning. His long sword split the air like a dark thunderbolt across the heavens and the earth. It was like a hot knife through butter. It tore the sky apart and charged toward the Taishan Saint Sun. The battle between the two was to determine victory and defeat, but it could also determine life and death. If he was not strong enough, the other party would not show any mercy and would definitely take the opportunity to kill him. On the contrary, it was normal for him to do so. If there was a chance, he would kill. There was a pale halo in the Taishan Saint Sun's eyes. With his pupils as the center, it quickly spread out like ripples. In an instant, the black in his eyes was completely covered by white. Gui Taishan. Intent. In an instant, the Taishan Saint Sun only felt that his spiritual will was highly concentrated, as if it had surpassed the limit. His perception of the surroundings was raised to the extreme and broke through the original level, reaching a higher level. The speed of his thoughts was almost 50% faster. As a thought flashed past, countless thoughts collided. Control. He seemed to be in control of all the changes around him. Everything was in his mind and perception. The Gui Taishan of the Taishan Saint Palace was the highest inheritance. Only the true upper echelons of the Taishan Saint Palace were qualified to touch and cultivate it, but it was very difficult to cultivate. Currently, among the many half-step great saints in the Taishan Saint Palace, only a few people had successfully cultivated it. The Taishan Saint Sun was extremely talented and was one of them. Every level of Gui Taishan had its mysteries. Intent was the strengthening and expansion of one's spiritual will. It could enhance one's perception and grasp all the movements around him. It could further and more accurately perceive all the opponent's attack trajectories and reactions, and then make more accurate responses. In an instant, Chernzong felt that the Taishan Saint Sun was different. His movements were more agile, and his reactions were faster and more flexible. It was as if the Taishan Saint Sun could sense his sword in advance and react in advance. It was very strange. In the past, it was always him who made others feel this way. Excited, Chernzong directly released his heart domain. That's right. In the previous battle, Chernzong not only suppressed his own battle strength, but he also did not use his heart domain. He only used it now. Under the cover of the heart domain, it was as if there were countless extremely sharp eyes staring at him. He could see everything clearly. With the support of his powerful divine will, he even felt like he was in control of everything. The heart domain and Gui Taishan clashed. This battle suddenly became very strange. Both Chernzong and the Taishan Saint Sun were in control of their surroundings. They observed each other's attack trajectories and reacted in advance. Therefore, it looked like the two of them were constantly gesturing and performing feint. It was very strange. It was like a silent battle. Gui Taishan, power. When the saber was pushed out, it was as if a saber mountain was moving horizontally. It shook heaven and earth, and the roar resounded through the ages. That shocking and unparalleled power spread in all directions, filling the ages and suppressing everything. Chen Zong could feel the power of his opponent's saber. Chapter 1782. The previous chapter should have been Chapter 50, but the Dominator of 6 Realms updated it to Chapter 47. It has been edited. Those who have subscribed can read it again without paying. The inconvenience was caused by the negligence of the Dominator of 6 Realms. I apologize. In the training field, the hard ground was broken and crumbled everywhere. Cracks spread all over the place. The swords and sabers clashed. Every strike seemed to be very casual, as light and nimble as the wind brushing against a willow tree. However, the power contained within each strike was incomparably shocking, and one would die upon contact. Chen Zong was a little surprised. The great mystery saint was indeed extraordinary. Not only had his combat strength improved, but his martial arts attainment had also improved a lot. He was very brilliant. If it were not for the opportunity in the Eternal Battle Fort, it would be difficult for Chen Zong to fight him. He might even be at a disadvantage. The great mystery saint was even more shocked than Chen Zong. His combat strength had soared, and he had mastered Gui Taishan. His strength was unrivaled among those of the same level, and he was incomparably strong. In other words, among the elite 6-star elites, there was no one in the entire Great Mystery Saint Palace who could be his match. This was not because someone had deliberately lost to him, but because it was the truth. Now, he was unable to defeat Chen Zong at the same level of combat strength. He could not even suppress him. The power of this strike was unparalleled. It was as if it could flatten mountains and flatten the world. Wind, lightning, fire. Triple pinnacle sword. Mountain destroyer. In an instant, Chen Zong slashed out with his sword. The heavenly wind, heavenly thunder, and heavenly fire Dao wills had all reached the first level of the supreme realm. When they merged, their power increased tremendously. In terms of Dao wills, these 3 Dao wills were only at the advanced level and could not be compared to the top Dao wills. They were only at the first level of the supreme realm and could not be compared to the second level. However, when they merged, their power was terrifying. They were not inferior to the top Dao wills at the second level of the supreme realm. The triple pinnacle sword was a sword technique that Chen Zong created after his consciousness returned to his body from the Eternal Battle Fort. It was the same as the sword intent stream and the yin-yang sword technique. It only had the first strike. The first strike was Mountain Destroyer. Whether it was wind, fire, or lightning, they all contained extremely terrifying power. For example, when a hurricane passed by, it could destroy cities. When a raging fire burned everything to ashes. When a thunderbolt struck down, it could break trees and rocks, and even shatter mountains. The first move of the tri-pinnacle sword, Mountain Crushing, took the destructive aspects of the 3 forces and fused them together, causing the destructive power to increase dramatically and become even more tyrannical, shocking, and terrifying. Mountain Destroyer. With one sword strike, the mountain was directly destroyed and flattened. This was an extremely powerful sword strike, an extremely destructive sword strike. The 3 forces of wind, thunder, and fire intertwined and collided. Destructive qi surged in all directions. The Taishan saint's face was solemn in the perception of Gui Tai Xuani, because the power contained in this sword was extremely overbearing and could destroy everything. The saber and the sword collided, and the 2 ultimate moves collided. In an instant, the saber was like a mountain, but the sword seemed to have a terrifying power that could destroy everything. It wanted to destroy the saber light. However, the saber light was incomparably condensed and frantically resisted. Chen Zong and the Taishan Saint Sun's eyes shot out cold light, as if they were fighting with swords. Confrontation. A horizontal push. Extremely terrifying chi rushed in all directions, as if it wanted to destroy everything. It was extremely overbearing. The shocking saber chi and sword light pierced through the void. When they slashed across the hard ground, they immediately tore it apart and spread out in all directions. This scene caused the expressions of the spectators to change greatly. It was too terrifying. Even though they were only at the level of an elite 6-star, their destructive power had already surpassed that of an elite 6-star. Even an ordinary 7-star wouldn't be able to match up to them. Chernzong had to admit that he had underestimated the Taishan Saint Sun. With such ability, even if he entered the Eternal Battle Fort, he would have a chance to rise and surpass ordinary geniuses. Of course, ordinary geniuses in the Eternal Battle Fort could also become peerless geniuses in the Tianyuan sacred region of the Lingwu sacred world. Peerless geniuses were just a title. In the Tianyuan sacred region, in the regal world, there were more than a dozen people on the 9-colored regal tablet. Every one of them was a peerless genius, but there were also differences in strength. Among them, the Taishan Saint Sun was one of the more outstanding ones. However, he was stronger. Tyrannical power burst out. When the saber and sword collided, they immediately collapsed and countless ripples swept out. Chernzong and the Taishan Saint Sun both retreated and attacked at the same time. A saber chi pierced through the air. The saber chi was shockingly fast. Return to Taishan. Speed. This level could not only be used on movement techniques, but also on attacks to increase the speed of attack. Will sword current. Heartbeat. Chernzong stabbed out with his sword, aiming straight for the Taishan Saint Sun's heart. This sword made the Taishan Saint Sun's heart tremble unconsciously, as if it was being pulled by an invisible force. That tremble also slightly affected the blood in his body. Sometimes, a slight effect would bring about a greater effect. However, the Taishan Saint Sun was strong enough to control it immediately. When the tip of the sword and the saber chi collided, a cold star bloomed. Then, like a star ring exploding, a terrifying force tore apart the void. It seemed to have scraped a layer of the void. Chernzong and the Taishan Saint Sun's eyes became sharper. Chernzong's eyes flickered with a dark luster. They became pitch black, as if they could swallow all light. They were like an abyss. However, the Taishan Saint Sun's eyes were filled with layers of pale light. They were like the vast sea of clouds. The strange clouds contained endless mysteries and murderous intent. In an instant, the white light in the Taishan Saint Sun's eyes rippled like the sea of clouds. His entire body was also dyed by the white light. He turned into a white stream of light and flew away. In an instant, he distanced himself from Chernzong. An extremely tyrannical aura suddenly exploded from the Taishan Saint Sun's body. It was like the eruption of a 10,000-ton volcano. The extremely powerful white light seemed to be endless. It rushed out from the Taishan Saint Sun's body and spread all around. It kept condensing behind him. In an instant, the outline of a world appeared behind the Taishan Saint Sun. It was as if the world was being created. In that world, one could vaguely see mountains, rivers, grass, and forests. It was like a projection of the world. In an instant, the Taishan Saint Sun's aura rose layer by layer. It soared up like a surging tide. 7-star. In the blink of an eye, the Taishan Saint Sun's aura broke through to the level of an ordinary 7-star. His combat power soared and broke through again, reaching the level of an elite 7-star. Kill. With a slash of the saber, the pale saber light tore through the air. It was many times more powerful than before. This saber light contained an extremely tyrannical power. It was as vast as the clouds in the sky, sweeping over the mountains and overturning the seas. The Taishan Saint Sun had already used a minor superpower of the Taishan Saint Palace, the Taishan Origin Restoration Technique. He used it to raise his combat power to the level of an elite 7-star. In that case, there was no need for him to suppress his combat power anymore. Boom! An extremely tyrannical aura suddenly exploded from Chen Zong's body. It was as if thousands of swords were resonating, splitting the sky and earth. An illusory sword shadow condensed behind him. It was a vision formed by fully activating the Taichu sword origin technique. An elite 7-star. The terrifying combat power and aura wreaked havoc in all directions. Instantly, the expressions of the spectators changed drastically. They were extremely shocked. The Taishan Saint Sun was a member of the Taishan Saint Palace. As the future palace lord, it was reasonable for him to have such means. However, this person also had such means. The Taishan Saint Sun was also very surprised. However, they did not know that this was actually Chen Zong's original combat power. Previously, he had merely suppressed his own combat power. The Taishan Saint Sun thought that Chen Zong had also used some means like him, such as some powerful secret techniques or minor superpowers. The Taishan Origin Restoration Technique of the Taishan Saint Palace was a minor superpower that could increase one's combat power. The Taishan Saint Sun had also started to cultivate it. When he had cultivated it to the Great Completion Realm, his combat power had directly increased by 1 star. If he could cultivate it to the Complete Realm, not only would his combat power increase, but he could also use it for a longer period of time. The interval between using it again would be shorter, and there were almost no side effects. Any secret technique that could increase one's combat power would usually have side effects. However, the Taishan Origin Restoration Technique did not. It was truly a minor superpower. Fight. When the elite 7-star battle power attacked, its power became even more terrifying, tyrannical, and shocking. The destructive power of each attack was several times stronger than before. The martial arts field of the City Lord's mansion was instantly ravaged. With his full combat power, Chen Zong was no longer suppressed and restrained. A carefree feeling spread throughout his body and mind. His essence, qi, and spirit surged as if they were going to surpass their limit. When he had suppressed his combat power, it was inevitable that his attacks would be affected. However, now that he had fully unleashed his combat power, there was no longer any suppression. The power of his sword technique could be fully unleashed. Suddenly, the Taishan Saint Sun realized that he was gradually being suppressed, although it was not obvious yet. The elite 7-star powerhouses guarding the Taishan Saint Sun also sensed this and were secretly shocked. With the same combat power, the Taishan Saint Sun was gradually being suppressed. It was unbelievable. Heart Intent Sword Current. Heart Move. The sword was extremely fast. Under the heart domain, it was extremely accurate. In an instant, it hit the Taishan Saint Sun's long saber and broke the saber that the Taishan Saint Sun had just used. Triple Pinnacle Sword. Mountain Destroyer. When the next sword attack was unleashed, its power became extremely terrifying and violent. It destroyed everything and slashed toward the Taishan Saint Sun. The heart domain focused on the speed of the sword. It surpassed the Mountain Destroyer sword. However, in terms of direct destructive power, the Mountain Destroyer sword surpassed the heart domain. Each had its own merits. The Mountain Destroyer sword was extremely powerful and violent. The Taishan Saint Sun could not withstand it and was directly sent flying. His qi and blood surged. The illusory world behind him also rippled like a stone falling into a calm lake. Kill. Chen Zong did not hesitate and attacked again. Heart Domain. The sword moved with the will, and the heart trembled with the sword. The void retreated under this sword. The Taishan Saint Sun immediately dodged, but Chen Zong's sword followed him like a shadow. It was difficult to avoid it no matter what. In an instant, the Taishan Saint Sun was drowned by the sword light. Under the heart domain, the Taishan Saint Sun's returning to Taishan seemed to be suppressed as well. When Chen Zong's combat power was not suppressed, the difference began to show. The same sword attack, but the power was completely different. He directly suppressed it to his heart's content. Mountain Destroyer Sword. Another sword attack. The Taishan Saint's son was sent flying. He spat out a mouthful of blood and was directly injured. Stop! The elite 7-star powerhouse guarding the Taishan Saint's son's face suddenly changed. He immediately shouted and unleashed an extremely powerful aura. He instantly rushed into the martial arts field and attacked Chen Zong. Chapter 1783. As soon as the rule of adding more chapters was released, some junior brothers expressed their support. Thanks to the Zhenwu Warring Kingdom, 4 tipping them with 10,000 traversing coins and adding 2 chapters. Therefore, there should be 4 chapters today. This is the first chapter. The Dominator of the 6 Realms will continue to write after dinner. The second chapter will be at around 2 p.m., the third at 5 p.m., and the fourth at 8 p.m. Boom! It was as if a storm was wreaking havoc in the training ground as it shook unceasingly. A huge palm print was condensed like a white millstone. It fell like a meteor, carrying the weight of a mountain as it pressed down with the force of 10,000 caddies. The storm roared as if it was going to destroy the martial arts field. An extremely strong and violent aura blasted toward Chen Zong without mercy. This palm was extremely powerful. It had reached the peak of the elite 7-star level and was not any weaker than the barbarian Mountain King. This kind of combat power could definitely be ranked in the top 10 of the Great Saint ranking. However, this person seemed to be unknown. Chen Zong could not help but sigh. The Taishan Holy Palace was indeed terrifying. As he thought about it, this palm naturally gave him some pressure and he had to dodge it. Of course, Chen Zong could also use his sword to block it. However, the real target was the Taishan Holy Sun. If he could find an opportunity to kill him, it would be a good result. His body seemed to have turned into a gust of wind and blended into the surroundings, avoiding the powerful palm print. Then, he raised his sword and silently slashed toward the Taishan Holy Sun. However, when the guard attacked, it actually gave the Taishan Holy Sun a chance of survival. This chance of survival allowed the Taishan Holy Sun to dodge Chen Zong's sword. Slash. A saber slashed through the air and instantly slashed out. It formed a horn-like encirclement with the guard's palm. 2 against 1. Chen Zong fought against 2 elite 7-star levels by himself and started an even more intense battle. The martial arts field could not withstand such an intense battle and instantly became even more damaged. Taishan Holy Sun, are you still not going to admit defeat? Chen Zong suddenly said. The Taishan Holy Sun's expression froze. His saber paused slightly, as if he was affected by Chen Zong's words. Originally, this battle was a battle between the 2 of them. On the surface, it was a battle to determine victory and defeat, but secretly, it was a battle to determine life and death. That was because as long as there was an opportunity, he would definitely make a move and kill the other party. However, after a fierce battle, Chen Zong had the upper hand in the end. The Taishan Saint had been injured, and his guards had joined the battle. It had become a 2-on-1 situation. In this way, he had actually lost. The slight pause gave Chen Zong a chance to dodge the guards. His sword pierced through the void and stabbed toward the Taishan Saint. This sword was completely unexpected. It was incomparably exquisite and sudden. It was at the moment when the Taishan Saint's mind paused. He showed no mercy and went straight for the heart, wanting to pierce through it. By the time the Taishan Saint realized it, he was already too late. However, when the deep night sword pierced the great mystic saint's chest, a beam of light suddenly lit up and became extremely tough. It instantly blocked Chen Zong's sword. The Taishan Saint's son also took the opportunity to fly back and distance himself from Chen Zong. The guard was extremely furious. His aura suddenly surged, surpassing the 7-star level and soaring to the level of an ordinary 8-star. His attacks were even more violent and terrifying. Anger, rage, just almost. If it were not for the secret treasure protecting him, the Taishan Saint Sun's heart would have been pierced through and killed. That would be his dereliction of duty and a great loss to the Taishan Saint Palace. Unforgivable. The guard had gone crazy. He attacked crazily without any fear of death. An ordinary 8-star powerhouse who had gone crazy was undoubtedly very terrifying because he had completely given up on defending himself. There was only one thought in his mind, and that was to kill Chen Zong. This kind of guard had actually been carefully cultivated by the Taishan Saint Palace for many years. His purpose was to protect the Saint Sun, a life-or-death guard. Now, the Taishan Saint Sun had almost been killed. He was extremely furious and did not hesitate to use his own life to kill the other party. The Taishan Saint Sun was also terrified and furious. He had actually been controlled by the other party's words. He had been absent-minded for a moment and had almost made a big mistake. Fortunately, he had a defensive secret treasure that could withstand the attack of a 9-star powerhouse. That secret treasure was the life-saving secret treasure that the Taishan Saint Palace had given him. Kill. The saber light turned into a saber mountain. It was extremely majestic and vast. It instantly attacked without mercy. In an instant, the pressure on Chen Zong increased greatly. When the sword was blocked, a strong and continuous force was sent out. It was very strong. Chen Zong knew that it would be difficult for him to kill the Taishan Saint Sun. The defense was too strong. Judging from the force of the counterattack, even if he used a secret technique to increase his battle strength, he would not be able to break it, let alone in such a situation. In fact, Chen Zong even felt a strong sense of danger from the rebounding force, which was enough to threaten his life. Taishan Saint Sun, you have lost this battle. Act according to the agreement. Chen Zong's voice entered the Taishan Saint Sun's ears. The Taishan Saint Sun was shocked. He thought that Chen Zong was going to do something again. Chen Zong turned into a shadow and retreated at an astonishing speed. In an instant, he left the martial arts field and approached the Golden Light King and the Red Goblin King. One sword, absolute light. Kill. The Golden Light King and the Red Goblin King were still in shock. The obvious difference in their battle strength made it impossible for them to dodge. This was a double kill. The Golden Light King and the Red Goblin King's necks were cut. Their heads were directly cut off. The sword chi invaded their bodies and destroyed them. After killing the Golden Light King and the Red Goblin King, Chen Zong turned into a stream of light and quickly rushed out of the city governor's office. With a sweep of the sword light, he immediately left. When the Taishan Saint Sun and his guard chased after him, Chen Zong had already escaped far away. The guard wanted to continue chasing but was stopped by the Taishan Saint Sun. Chen Zong. The Taishan Saint Sun was filled with anger. It filled his chest and was about to explode. Humiliation. Great humiliation. He originally thought that he had won the battle today. He did not expect to be suppressed and even injured by his opponent. He also did not expect that even when he and his guard worked together, they still could not kill his opponent. If not for the protection of the secret treasure, his heart would have been pierced by his opponent's sword and he would have died. Now, even the 2 6-star experts who had pledged their allegiance to him were killed by his sword. Although they had an agreement before that if he lost, he would have to hand them over. The consequence would be that he would be killed. However, handing them over was completely different from being killed. To the arrogant Taishan Saint Sun, he could not accept it. Anger. That anger burned wildly, almost burning the Taishan Saint Sun to ashes. The vast murderous intent seemed to rush out of the 9 serenities of hell, burning everything. However, the Taishan Saint Sun did not lose his mind. Instead, he maintained a trace of spiritual wisdom and calmness. He calmed down little by little. Such a person was even more terrifying. He had talent, strength, opportunity, background, and could control himself. No one can spread what happened today. Otherwise, you will be punished for betraying the sect, the Taishan Saint Sun said in a low voice. His tone was filled with cold anger. Yes. The city lord knew that this was for him. If what happened today was spread, it would definitely be a blow to the Taishan Saint Sun's reputation. It would not be good for the Taishan Holy Palace either. Fortunately, the battle here had been sealed. The outside world did not know at all, let alone find out. After suppressing his anger, the Taishan Saint Sun immediately left Taishan City with his guard and returned directly to Taishan Mountain. He did not return to his cave residence. Instead, he went straight to the main hall of the Taishan Holy Palace. Greetings, Master. The Taishan Saint Sun bowed to the palace lord of the Taishan Holy Palace. No need to be so courteous. The palace lord smiled and said, "Why have you come today?" The palace lord immediately saw that the Taishan Saint Sun's state was not right, so he asked, "Master, I want to enter the Taishan cave," the Taishan Saint Sun said without hesitation. His tone was firm and determined. The Taishan cave. The sacred palace master was startled when he heard this. His expression turned solemn as a light flashed across his eyes. He stared at the Taishan saint and said, "You have to consider this carefully. Entering the Taishan cave is a narrow escape. Even with your talent, you will not receive any preferential treatment. You will die if you are careless." "Master, I have made up my mind," the Taishan Saint Sun said seriously. Every word carried amazing power. "With your talent and the resources of the palace, your achievements in the future will surpass mine. In fact, there is no need to take this risk," the palace lord said. He was the only 9-star cultivator on the Taishan Supreme Saint list. He said that the Taishan Saint Sun's achievements in the future would surpass his. In other words, the Taishan Saint Sun's future combat ability could at least reach the elite 9-star level. It was also possible for him to reach the Supreme Saint plane in the future. In that case, there was no need to enter the Taishan cave. The Taishan cave was the most terrifying forbidden area of the Taishan Holy Palace. The palace lord did not know what kind of dangers were inside, because he had never entered it before. However, according to the records left behind by the old ancestor, there was an enormous opportunity inside. However, it was extremely difficult to obtain that opportunity, and it was extremely dangerous. The Taishan Saint Sun was determined to enter it. This time, he had lost to Chenzong. He had lost in a head-on battle. This was unacceptable. He had to become stronger and defeat and kill Chenzong. Only then could he get rid of the shadow in his heart. However, with his own efforts and the resources of the Taishan Holy Palace, he had been surpassed and suppressed by Chenzong. If this continued, he did not have the confidence to surpass Chenzong. What was even more unacceptable was that the gap between them might get bigger and bigger. In that case, he could only take the risk. The Taishan cave. This was the only opportunity in the Taishan Holy Palace that could allow him to improve by leaps and bounds. Although there was a slim chance of survival, he would pay any price to obtain the opportunity. Strength. As long as he could obtain more strength. Since you have made up your mind, I will arrange for the Taishan cave to be opened. You can enter in 3 days, the palace lord said solemnly. After Chenzong killed the Golden Light King and the Red Succubus King, he quickly left and found a relatively quiet and safe place to cultivate in seclusion. He had gained some benefits from the battle with the Taishan Saint Sun. He needed to reflect and absorb the essence of the battle. He needed to strengthen his foundation and accumulate potential for future breakthroughs. It was a pity that he did not kill the Taishan Saint Sun this time, but it was not a big deal. If he did not succeed this time, there would be a next time. Based on Chen Zong's understanding of the Taishan Saint's son, he would definitely not give up and would come looking for him again. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.